Welcome back to another reaction stream. We're looking ahead to Double Game Week 7 and talking about Game Week 6. There's a lot to uncover. I've got 3 flags basically in my team, including James Maddison and then some bench players, Enrico Henry and Ursula. But still, it hasn't been a good start to the season. I think Game Week 1 was pretty good for me, but ever since, it's just been downhill, especially in the last 4 weeks, I'd say, with consecutive red arrows. And it was looking good on the Saturday, a completely different story on the Sunday, though, despite the 2 assists by James Maddison and Saka getting 13 points overall. But there's a lot to dissect. I'll get straight into this. And if you are looking to wildcard, I would refer you to the best wildcard team video I uploaded earlier today, instead of me just recapping on what I said in that video where I talk about everything in detail. Welcome, Sadundra. It's good to see you. And no worries if you can only catch it on the replay. In terms of the 3 transfer plans you've asked for, A, B, and C, I think they all have, really good potential, and there's not going to be much separating all 3 this week. But my favourite moves long term would be B. So Sterling and Estupinian to Trippier and James Ward-Prowse for a -4 hit. That'll be my favourite move if you're looking to carry these transfers over to game weeks 8, 9, etc. For a 1-week punt only, it's also very difficult, to be fair. Pedro to Morris looks like a really risk-free transfer, and it should pay off no matter what. With the -4s, of course, there's always a bit of uncertainty, but my preference would be B, followed by A, and then option C. And you might be right, Zuma could get a goal against Sheffield United. That is definitely possible, and you've also gained Morris, but my favourite move would be B from the options you listed. So just to make it clear, the option I'd recommend is Sterling and Estupinian out to Trippier and James Ward-Prowse. The only issue I have with that is getting rid of Estupinian, because by game week 10, you'd probably want him back as well. Ali says, I'm going to make a wildcard. Yeah, so literally I'm on about. So I'd refer you to the best wildcard team video I uploaded. If you go on my channel, it's literally the first video that you'll see there. Same says, I got 84 points this week thanks to Trippier. Thoughts on Semenyo to Morris? I think that's a pretty standard transfer, and I'd go ahead with it. Just like with the Joao Pedro to Morris transfer for Sadundra, it's risk averse. You're not really going to lose anything unless Joao Pedro goes ballistic, but I don't think that'll be the case against Aston Villa. So yeah, I think Semenyo to Morris is probably the right call. Of course, in your case, it's Bournemouth. They're facing Arsenal, and I think Morris is going to do a really good job. So yeah, I'd buy him. Of course, beyond game week 7, you can always sell, but I think he's a good option for this double game week. Welcome, Potter. Is there such a thing as Happy Monday? Who knows? Maybe there is, but welcome. Same with Genius Gamer. Welcome, Shez too. To be honest, I always do UCL fantasy content for the last 3 years, I think it is. Definitely last 2 consistently. So that's not even a question. There will be videos like the Limitless Team, Wildcard videos, a chip strategy guide, the team selection, and the deadline stream. All of that is going to be headed your way. And every single week, I will do basically those 3 videos: Limitless, Wildcard, team selection, and the deadline stream. So you have 3 to 4 videos every single week for UCL fantasy at the very least. Welcome, Kobe. Good to see you, and hope you're doing well as well. Will you captain Haaland next week? It seems a bit boring, but probably. My only alternative, I think, would be maybe a Newcastle player, if I were to bring them in. I'll talk about that in the team selection video, and maybe Bukayo Saka away to Bournemouth. But apart from that, I'm looking at the other options, and I think Erling Haaland is probably the best by some distance, because otherwise it's Alvarez, and I'm not going to captain Alvarez over Haaland in most cases. So at the moment, it looks like it, but if I were to go against Haaland, it's probably for a Trippier or a Saka, depending on if I bring Trippier in this week and I bring that Newcastle player. Happy Human says, I got 88 points this week with Trippier and Botman, now almost in the top 100k. That's a really good position to be in. I definitely wish I was in that position rather than where I am. Things do change very quickly though, and I think there are some people who jump from 4 million to 1 million, and also some who have experienced some really big and severe rank drops. So I'd just be a bit careful. Obviously, you're in a good position having both of those Newcastle defenders, and I think you've got a good foundation to keep on pushing, but it's just things are very volatile at the moment. So if you have a bad week, then don't worry about it, and there's always another one to bounce back. No tech. Morris is an essential, but he is a recommendation for this week. I'll talk about him in the transfer tips video probably tomorrow, so expect that video coming out by Wednesday, and I will talk about Morris. But he's really just a punt for double game week 7, 2 plum fixtures against Everton and Burnley. But I have to say, Everton looked pretty decent the other day against Brentford, and that might be a bit more complicated. And with Luton Town, I don't really trust them at all, and it's just Morris who is a decent option because he's on penalties and he's a decent goal scorer. Sahil says, sell Sterling or roll my free transfer. Depends which players you can bring in, because if you've already got the kind of main options, then you could make a case for rolling. But my preference overall is to sell Sterling. I have to say that, but I don't know who your other four midfielders are, and that makes it a bit more difficult. Welcome, John Darren. Saka or Son for long term? Well, long-term is Saka. I know Son has better fixtures over the next 5 or 6, and if you count that as your kind of long-term pick, then Son will probably outscore him. But if you're looking even beyond until the end of the season, or even, let's say, game week 19, I think Saka will do better. He's just so consistent, and Son is more explosive, but he's returned in 2 games against Burnley and Arsenal, but in every other game he has blanked, and I prefer those kind of consistent players like Saka, who, in essence, has only blanked once this season so far. So I think Saka still. FPL Glory Algeria says, and Boomer to Bowen. Yeah, that's a good... I think Bowen will outscore him this week. And the fixtures are still a bit mixed bag for West Ham, but so, you can say the same thing about Mbumo too. Yeah, I think that's a good transfer for this week only, but beyond that, I'd still be very wary about Mbumo, and I think they'll score a similar amount over the next 5 or 6 game weeks as an example. Osula to Morris is a very basic transfer. I think you should do it. There's no risk attached whatsoever. But if it's a question of that or Chilwell to Trippier, that's where the thing really lies. So as a 1-week punt, I prefer Morris. He's got a double game week, and I think he'll score at least 1 goal. Chilwell to Trippier is the best long-term move, though. So if you're not looking to wildcard in game week 8, or, let's say, for example, you want a transfer for the next 3, 4, and potentially 5 game weeks, then I think Chilwell to Trippier is just the best move for you, because ultimately with Morris, if you buy him in this week, I'd want to sell him in game week 8. So yeah, it really just depends, but my overall preference is Chilwell to Trippier. Welcome, Junior. I'm doing well. What about you? High thoughts on Jackson to Morris. I think that's, once again, a bit of a maybe basic transfer, but I think it's just a very sensible and simple move for you. And once again, it comes down to it with Morris. Would you be keeping him long term? Maybe not, but even just for 1 double game week, it's worth making that move. Jackson suspended, and ultimately you can go from Morris to Watkins potentially, or Alvarez, Awani, even Callum Wilson. You've got plenty of alternatives there that you can move them on to. I think you should be able to afford pretty much all of them except maybe Watkins and Wilson, but that should be good for you. I think Morris is a good transfer. John Darren says, I have 2 transfers. I have good players for this game week, but I have to make a transfer. What's your suggestions? Well, ultimately, John, I don't want to, say it like this, but I don't know your team, so it's impossible for me to say what you should do, because I just don't know who is in your 50-man squad. Should I get Wilson or Morris for Jackson? Well, I think long-term Wilson outscores Morris. I think that's quite clear, but my preference is Morris, just to target that double game week, and then ultimately afterwards you can sell him to Wilson or another forward of your choice. But for game week 7, I think Morris is the one to buy. Garav says, in 5 out of 6 game weeks, my second striker got 1 point. So frustrating. Yeah, there's a lot of yellow cards this season due to the rules. If you complain about something like Jackson keeps on doing, you get booked. And of course, some good and bad things, related to these new rules. But ultimately, FPL-wise, it is quite damning. If you look at my team, I think the likes of a Doggy, and to be fair, it wasn't because of dissent, but he got a yellow card. Chilwell got 1. In Mbumo, so quite a lot of yellow cards spread throughout my team, and every single week I seem to have 2 or 3 players who get a booking, so it is very frustrating, and especially when it's always your forwards. And if you have Jackson, then of course that will explain why. Junior says, Chilwell and Martinelli, if he isn't fit to Diaby and Trippier, already have Botman. So funny you should ask. So there is some reports that came out today, some positive news for Arsenal. It looks like Martinelli could be fit for the Man City game. Now, from an FPL perspective, that doesn't really mean much because he's likely to miss the Bournemouth game, and then when he comes back, it's Man City. So he's still a sell, in my opinion, but it is positive for Arsenal, and that's going to be massive. I think they missed the likes of Martinelli, Trossard, Partey, Declan Rice in the second half. All these players very deeply, and I think there will be a massive boost when they return. I'm not so sure if Martinelli will be available for Bournemouth, but it doesn't look like it. But there is a chance he is available for Man City in game week 8. In terms of the transfers you're asking about, I think they're perfect, to be fair. Diaby might be a bit frustrating at times and a bit inconsistent, but I think generally he's one of the best midfielders to buy at that price point and below, and Trippier just speaks for himself. Now, overall, I have to say Botman is probably the better purchase in terms of his price and value, because it also allows you to get Salah in the midfield or maybe go for Heung-min Son. But in terms of who's going to score more points, Trippier and Botman, you would give it to Trippier, and I think it's a close call, but Trippier put on a masterclass in game week 7. and in Game Week 6, sorry, and I think he's going to do really well over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, and I think those transfers are really solid. Savio says Sterling or Chilwell, who to get rid of more urgently? I'd say Chilwell because he's not even in the team at the moment. Now, he could come back in against Fulham, but with these players like Joao Pedro, Chilwell now, you don't want to have that headache every single week. So I'd say Chilwell is the bigger priority. And you've also got Newcastle in the basically near the beginning still of a really good fixture run. So Chilwell to Trippier or even Botman is a very simple move to make, and I think that's worth doing in your case. Sterling you can maybe get rid of the week after, or maybe around game week 9-10 after they've played Burnley, but ultimately they're both sells, and I'd prioritise Chilwell first in terms of offloading him. By the way, thank you very much to those who have tuned in today. If you haven't already, smash the like button and subscribe for new. We're going to try and get this stream to over 100 likes. It'd be massively appreciated, and it helps us out in the algorithm. There'll be more streams and videos to come over the next week, so keep an eye out for the transfer tips video for Game Week 7. Players like Morris will be discussed, and even maybe some really popular transfers like Trippier. And there's also going to be a team selection video as always. The deadline stream on Saturday is going to be an early Saturday deadline for those in the UK. And also UCL fantasy content, the chip strategy for match day 2, the best limitless and wildcard teams separately, team selection and the deadline stream on Tuesday. So be sure not to miss any of that content by subscribing. And we hit 20,000 last week. The growth around that time was absolutely insane, and we're looking to get to similar numbers over the next week or two with UCR Fantasy. Sahil says my other 4 midfielders are Salah, Saka, Mitoma, Mbumo. Let me just go back to your other question. I'm guessing that's a follow-up. So Sterling or Roma free transfer. Yeah, so really I think the only thing you're missing is a Spurs midfielder, but they face Liverpool. And I would predict a high-scoring game there. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, Spurs have scored 2 or more goals in every single game so far this season. And I could see them doing something similar to Liverpool even. But that should be a good game, quite evenly balanced. It wouldn't surprise me if it was a draw. I think Liverpool are the better team, but with the home advantage, I think Spurs could get a result. But ultimately, yeah, it's not like you need to sell Sterling, but there are better midfielders. There's no doubt about it. You can even go to Bowen, for example, against Sheffield United, or Ward-Prowse. I think they are better options than Sterling. Then there's also Son, Maddison if he's fit, Phil Foden. So I think there are a few midfielders you can go to, but it isn't urgent. It's not an absolute, sell right now. But ultimately, Sterling is a sell, whether it's now, Game Week 8, or in Game Week 9. And maybe I'd be very tempted by a West Ham midfielder if you're not looking to go for Maddison or Son this week. Supreme Sports says, is Stupinian to Trippier good or bad transfer? I think it's good overall. Trippier should outscore him over the next 3. I'd be hugely surprised if he doesn't. Now, bear in mind that Newcastle still might rotate in the Premier League because they've got a bit of an easy fixture run, and they're also in the group of death in the Champions League. They face Man City in a few days' time in the Carabao Cup, so they could go strong there in the Champions League, and that might result in some rotation. So it could be frustrating with the likes of Trippier or Botman. I think they'll start most games, but there is the possibility of rotation there. And with Estupinian, you can always bring him back in around Game Week 10. So ultimately, it is a good transfer, but Estupinian is someone to get back in around Game Week 10. Mark Casserly says, have 2 free transfers. Who should I get in for Chilwell and Jackson? Either Trippier or Botman for Chilwell, and for Jackson, it's between Alvarez, Morris, or Callum Wilson for me. Of course, with Wilson, he's more of a short-term punt, and I'm more concerned about him than the Newcastle defenders in terms of rotation. Isak and Callum Wilson will inevitably, I can't even speak English, they will inevitably rotate, and that is a huge concern for me, and that's why I haven't recommended Wilson too much. I'd rather go for Newcastle defenders, but he is definitely worth considering anyway. Emma O'Connell says, hi Dylan, would you do -4 Sterling and Chilwell to Trippier and Ward-Prowse? Yes, I would. To be quite frank with you, even if Chilwell starts on the left-hand side as a left winger against Fulham, I'm just not too keen on these Chelsea assets. Look, defensively, they're not too bad. They're not conceding many chances. A bit unfortunate, you could say, after Gusto got the red card, things changed. I think before that, they were arguably the better team compared to Aston Villa. But things aren't going the way. The Premier League is full of matches that go down to fine margins, and all of them are not really falling Chelsea's way. They don't have enough quality as well, which plays a big part. But I would do it. I would. Junior says, let me just get that up again. Apologies for it. And by the way, I'm a bit behind, but I'm just going to try answer every single question since it's a bit of a calmer stream compared to what you'll see in UCL Fantasy on Tuesday and also in the deadline stream for FPL. So I'm going to try to go for every single question. Your question will be answered eventually. So yeah, sorry, my one was for a -4. So let me just scroll back up and see what you're talking about. So Chilwell and Martinelli, I'd still do it, to be honest. I still think it's worth a -4. Will Chilwell start? I have a feeling he might, but honestly, it doesn't really matter if he does at this point or not. I think he's a sell. Newcastle attack being underlooked. Well, the thing is, I like Wilson and Isak. The problem is rotation there. Then you've got Gordon, fine. He should have a run in the team with Harvey Barnes out. But there's also the case of rotation. And more importantly still, Gordon is 1 yellow card away from suspension. He's got 4 bookings already. And just like Jackson, he could be suspended fairly soon. So look, Newcastle attackers are fine. Having one is good, but with some people maybe considering a double up, I definitely wouldn't do that. Not just because of rotation, but also in the case of Gordon, there's the possibility of being suspended. I'd rather go for 2 Newcastle defenders and then possibly add an attacker. And my preference right now would be of Callum Wilson. Thank you, FPL Glory Algeria. I appreciate it. Matthew says, hi Dylan, is Trippier a rotation risk for Game Week 8 with Man City on Wednesday and PSG the week after? You pretty much covered it as well there. So earlier, maybe a few minutes ago, I was talking about this, and it is a possibility. It would not surprise me if Livramento came in. Now, you could also make a case for Livramento playing on the left-hand side instead of Burn, whilst Trippier keeps his spot, because he's so important to Newcastle, not just defensively, but also in terms of chance creation. He is their creative hub in that defence, and also, you could argue he's more creative than any player they have, but yeah, he is a rotation risk. I believe he is. But having said that, I think he will start against Burnley, and maybe the rotation will happen around Game Week 10 or 11. It's all speculation, of course, but is rotation a possibility? For sure. Awful game week. When will Poch learn at Chelsea? 3 centre-backs playing again. Maybe we'll be forced into 3 at the back, and Chil will be a wing-back, but don't hold your breath. Yeah, the thing is with Pochettino, he's going for Colwill as the left back for a bit more defensive solidity, but when he plays Chilwell, he plays him as a left winger, and it's very surprising because in pre-season he didn't really do this, and I think he found something that was working, sort of. And of course, you can't base everything off pre-season, but if you're working on something and developing ideas, players in certain positions, you should stick with it. I was also criticising Arteta for a similar thing throughout pre-season, that he didn't play Partey as a right back, but then game week 1 he plays him as a right back, and it disrupts the balance in the midfield. So maybe Pochettino is making some mistakes, but ultimately the issues run much deeper at Chelsea, which is why Potter wasn't able to succeed. He didn't get enough time or backing. Thomas Tuchel as well. So things haven't looked good. Frank Lampard, of course, who, to be honest, no one expected to do a great job as an interim. But I think Poch will eventually succeed, or at least progress Chelsea. I see him more as a builder rather than a title winner, which Chelsea obviously want to look for with the amount that they spent. Supreme Sports says, if Isak starts in the Carabao Cup, does that mean Wilson will definitely start versus Burnley? I wouldn't say definitely, but he'd have a very good chance, around 80%, 70% if you had to put a figure on it. But yeah, if Isak starts in the Carabao, which I expect him to, I think Wilson will start in the Premier League. And I think that will be the case. And that's why I like Wilson as a short-term punt in FPL. But long-term, my concern is when you bring him in and then in 2 or 3 game weeks time he's benched, you're just going to be left very frustrated because it's going to be a common theme throughout this season. Foden for Sterling. Yeah, I like that. And look, to be honest, Foden is a good FPL option. Even before his haul against Nottingham Forest, I was saying he's doing a decent job. He was joint top assister at one stage, and I thought he'd do very well against Nottingham Forest. But just bear in mind, the fixtures between Game Week 8 and 14 are very poor for Man City. Now, I still think they'll win the vast majority of games, if not all of them, with the way they're playing. But there might be better alternatives like Bowen, James Ward-Prowse, Maddison, Sterling. Forget I said Sterling. Heung-min Son. I think those options are even better than Foden over the next 6 game weeks. Yeah, good question. So Maddison is currently flagged. He's at 50%. I think he spoke about it after the game. He said he felt it after contact from Jorginho. Now, look, I think Maddison would be fine, but he did come off. And I felt if him and Son stayed on the pitch, they really could have gone on to win the game. I think Arsenal were really there for the taking there on the day. But Maddison's injury, we don't know enough yet. Wait for more updates, of course. If you're playing the wildcard, don't think that Maddison is kind of a certainty in your wildcard squad. Be prepared for some alternatives like Jarrod Bowen or Ward-Prowse. But it isn't looking maybe too optimistic. I'm still quite, let's say optimistic, or I'm still quite confident it'll be available for Liverpool. But just be careful. Keep an eye out for more updates over the next week or so. But my guess is that he'll be fine. Mbuma to Gordon, setting up to bring Salah in soon. I'll be honest, look, Gordon, really good fixtures. He's had a good start to the season, but he's one yellow card away from suspension, so be very careful with that. And I still prefer Mbumo overall, but it's not a bad transfer. Hopefully it turns out well for you. And as for bringing in Salah, you know, that's a really good positive from that transfer that you're able to now afford Salah. Morris for a -4. Depends who you sell, to be honest. If it's Jackson to Morris for a -4, I think fair enough, go for it. If you're selling Alvarez or Callum Wilson, which I'm guessing you're not, but if you were, that's when I'd say no. So it really depends who you sell. No, once again, like I was talking about just a few minutes ago or a minute ago, I wouldn't sell Maddison. Wait for more updates, and ultimately, I think he'll be fine. If he were to miss out against Liverpool, I'm still fairly confident he'll be available for Game Week 8, and you'd want him against Luton Town away. So my advice is to hold. I don't think he's a sell. Of course, if he is ruled out in a few days' time, then that's when the situation changes. But right now, he is not a sell. Gaurav says, Estupiñán and Cash play each other. Which one would you rather start? True, Cash has the home advantage. Estupiñán is the better FPL asset. I'd still go for Estupiñán, I think, but one thing I will say is that Brighton's record against Aston Villa is really poor. I think they lost both games last season, correct me if I'm wrong. So that would be a concern. And I'm actually open to taking a -4 here and bringing in Trippier and Botman, and then I'll bench Estupiñán. And what that allows me to do is bring in Son for Saka when Arsenal play Man City and Son and Tottenham play Luton Town. So I might go for something like that in order to make future moves too. In terms of your situation, I would go for Estupiñán, but I'm not really expecting anything. FPL Glory Algeria says West Ham fixtures are amazing. Yeah, and that's why Areola isn't the best wildcard team. I was seriously considering Bowen and James Ward-Prowse to include as well. But yeah, West Ham assets look suddenly decent. I wouldn't go for Antonio. I'm saying it right now. Whether they're playing Sheffield United at home, whoever it may be, I would not recommend Antonio. Who I would recommend, James Ward-Prowse, Bowen, and Areola. They're the 3 West Ham players to get. Would I triple up? No, but I think 1 or 2 is certainly fine. Jackson replacements, mate. Same like I said before the Game Week 6 deadline. Alvarez, I'd say Awani is still a good option. Morris now for double Game Week 7, but only double Game Week 7. After that, I'd sell. Ollie Watkins is looking like a solid option, and Wilson. If I were to rank them overall, not just thinking about Game Week 7, but the bigger picture, my favourites are still Alvarez, Watkins, Wilson. I think those would be my top 3. Welcome Milner had an 82-point game week and now needs some help with how to get Salah in game week 9. Here is what I did. Sell Wissa and Mbumo and one of Bruno, Maddison or Saka. Bring in bench options, Anderson, Share. Yeah, so this is the problem. Because all 3 of those players you mentioned can do really well in game week 7 and also in the weeks to come. So with Saka, he is someone I'd be prepared to sell, but in game week 8, not now. I would not sell him ahead of game week 7 against Bournemouth. Now, I have to say, would I captain Saka over Haaland? That's a different question, of course, but someone was asking about whether I'm going to captain Haaland earlier. Now, my concern with Arsenal is that away from home, they control games, they look defensively solid, but they don't create enough chances, and they won 2 games 1-0 away from home. And I could see something similar potentially against Bournemouth, where it's going to be tight, Arsenal might edge it, but they might not score enough goals to make Saka worth keeping. Having said that, it really depends on when you're looking to sell these players. And with Salah, would I bring him in necessarily against Tottenham? Yes, one of his favourite opponents, but Tottenham are looking in decent shape right now. They've got the euphoria of the North London derby result and also Postecoglou's solid start. So I'm a bit concerned about that one. What I would do in your situation is either get rid of Bruno now, and this is assuming Maddison's fit, by the way, get rid of Bruno now for Salah, or in game week 8, I'd sell Saka and then bring in Salah, and around game week 9 onwards, that's when Salah has a great run of fixtures. But let's be aware, he's facing Tottenham and Brighton in the next 2. I think he'll do well, but I don't think he'll get mega returns per se in both of those games. I think he could in one, but not both. Steelix says, who is the best to captain for game week 7? I'm going to name a few players. So Haaland, of course, is always in contention. Boring, I know. That's the way FPL is nowadays. Some other options I consider are Saka, but Arsenal are concerning in some departments. I've said this even from game week 1. I'd also say Morris, simply for the double game week. I'd also put the likes of Callum Wilson, depending on the lineup against Man City in the Carabao Cup, Trippier in the mix. So I think that's generally where I'd look at. The likes of Heung-min Son and Salah could do well this week, but I still don't think I'd captain them necessarily because the game could go either way or be a draw and the goals are shared. So my kind of top 5 captains would be Haaland, Saka, Morris, Trippier, Wilson, and if I had to add a 5th player in there, that's a bit difficult with the way the fixtures are this week, but I'd say Bowen. I think Bowen, Ward-Prowse have a really good chance of hauling, and I'd probably put Bowen. Now, I think the Sheffield United manager could be sacked. If that's the case, they could get a new manager, managerial bounce, be very defensively solid, try to put everyone back and defend a 0-0 draw. They could do that and frustrate West Ham. So things can change, of course, but Bowen would be a very good pick, I think, for the captaincy. Thank you, Savio. Good luck with your fight. Safe flight, of course, and I appreciate you tuning in. Junior says, is Maddison fit? So we don't know enough. That's literally the simple answer. He picked up a knock against Arsenal. He came off with around 15 minutes to go. Look, I think he'll be fine. That's my personal opinion, but I don't know enough about the injury. Things can develop. Let's see what the scans are. He is currently at 50% chance of playing, which isn't ideal, but I wouldn't be too concerned personally. I think he'll be fine. Let's see what else we have. Obviously, I don't want to, sound like a broken record, but just to keep the numbers going and pushing towards new goals, let's keep on going for maybe 300 likes would be a stretch for this stream. I'd say over 100 likes for the stream, and we're looking to get to 21,000 subscribers. And especially when the Champions League comes around again in match day 2, we're looking to get to 21,000 subscribers by the next Tuesday deadline there. So that's another goal we're looking to reach within the next week, and it's all thanks to your support. Supreme says, I don't have any Newcastle players or Tottenham, and I have Chilwell and Jackson, one free transfer. What should I do? Well, with Newcastle, my priority would be the defenders, so Botman and or Trippier. As for Tottenham, remember they play Liverpool this week, and while Son and Maddison could do very well, I wouldn't be in a rush to buy them this week, especially with Maddison being an injury doubt. So what I would do in your situation is prioritize Newcastle first, but wait for their lineup against Man City before making a transfer if you can. Just a bit of spoiler alert, I may not have done that myself, but we'll talk more about that in the team selection video. But yeah, I think Trippier and or Botman should be the priority, and in Game Week 8, that's when you should bring in the 2 Spurs attackers if possible, and Udogie against Luton Town away. But you've got Chilwell and Jackson. So yeah, tough scenario there. I'd sell Chilwell first, I think, in this case. I know Jackson is probably the bigger priority sell, but based on your team situation and not having any Newcastle or Tottenham, I would do Chilwell to Trippier or Botman. And in terms of Jackson, you could sell him to Wilson. You could do that. Or you could wait a little bit and then just go to Awani or Alvarez if you're looking for a longer term pick. Even Watkins, very solid fixtures coming up. However, one other alternative for you, and I know it's a -4 hit Supreme, is to do Jackson to Morris as a 1-week punt, or Wilson, and go about it on a week-by-week basis. But ultimately, Chilwell to a Newcastle defender is a very simple transfer. Bongo says, I've just brought in Alvarez for Archer -4, sold in Boomer for Anderson from Newcastle, going 3-4-3 with Watkins, Alvarez, Haaland, Salah, Diaby, Son, Maddison, Cash, Botman, Anderson, Areola. That is a good team. But I'm just wondering if you are... Oh, no, okay, fair enough. You start with the forwards. Yeah, that's completely fine. Good lineup this week. I think you should do well. Of course, Botman, very good transfer. And you had him already. Alvarez in for Archer. I know Alvarez has a difficult fixture run soon, but he should still do fine. I like it. Trippier won't take so many set pieces when Tonali plays. He's still a good option, though. And I still think he is their best set piece taker, especially from corners and free kicks. So I still think he takes most of them. Zukul says, Chilwell thoughts because he gets small bits of points. Well, I think he's a sell. And let's say, for example, you've got Chilwell, Jackson and Sterling. You could argue that Jackson is the biggest priority to sell. Then it's Chilwell, then Sterling. But it all depends on your team situation. Ultimately, I would sell him to a Newcastle defender. Lipuk says, the Stupinian Chilwell share a Kanji Kabore, 1 million in the bank, 2 transfers. Chilwell to Trippier. I know it sounds boring, but that's something you can consider. The only thing I'd say with Trippier, with those of you maybe looking to buy him, be careful, because if you want to bring in Salah and you're not wildcarding soon, it might become very difficult to do so when you have Trippier in your team because he's so expensive. So if not, go for Botman. And you could even bring both of them in if money is no issue for you. But in terms of, who to sell from those 5, well, you've already got Share, to be honest. So I think Chilwell to Trippier or Botman is fine, and that's about it. I wouldn't triple up on them defensively. Hedge says, I accidentally captain Maddison, turned out pretty well. Well, yeah, he made a positive gain over Haaland, so that's not too shabby. And I'm actually looking at Luton Town away in Game Week 8, and I think Maddison could be the best captain that week. His away record is insane. I think he got a goal against Burnley. He got 2 assists against Brentford, 2 assists against Arsenal, And also against Bournemouth, I'm pretty sure he scored as well. So he hasn't blanked in any away games so far. Luton Town is probably the best fixture you can have, home or away. So yeah, I think Maddison captain in Game Week 8 is definitely a shout. Not in Game Week 7 though. Even though Liverpool Spurs could be a high scoring game, that's not a sort of game I like to captain a player on. Zuko says, which defender do I buy with 5.6 million for Chilwell? Well, that's a bit more difficult, of course, because you're 0.9 million or now 1 million short of Trippier. You could go for Cher or Dan Burn, but there are others besides Newcastle. I know they just beat Sheffield United 8-0. It's a mixture of Newcastle being good and also Sheffield United being absolutely terrible, if I'm being quite honest. But I think if you really want to defend the transfer, I'd actually consider Walker. I think he's been a great asset this season. He's someone I haven't really talked about on this channel. I typically recommend the Kanji, Gvardiol or Ruben Dias, but right now I think Walker looks like the best option, so I'd still go for a Man City defender despite their tough fixture run coming up. John Petter says, hi Dylan, is Foden a safe starter? This is always a difficult question to answer because as soon as you say yes, he gets benched the next game. But I think for the time being, with Bernardo Silva being out for another week or two, Foden should start against Wolves. I'd be very surprised if he was benched. And against Arsenal, I think he will get the start, actually. So I think for the short term, yes, he is a safe starter, quote unquote. But long term, that won't be the case, especially once the likes of De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Kovacic all return from injury. Also, is Morris worth a -4? Depends who you sell, of course, but ultimately I'd say yes, in some circumstances it is worth it. Jackson to Morris, easily worth a -4 hit. Would I sell Watkins? Definitely not. Alvarez, no chance. Awani, no, I wouldn't do that. So it just depends who your forward is, but I think in some cases, yes, I think Morris could do well this week, get a goal, maybe some bonus points, and that would be a decent return. Fingon says, what about for -8 points? If you're on about Morris, look, ultimately, when we talk about -8 and stuff like that, technically it's just an additional -4 transfer if you put it that way. So who are you selling for Morris? And that is where it ultimately comes down to. But I wouldn't break my team and go out of my way to buy Luton Town and Burnley players, including Morris. However, if you're doing something like Trippier in for Chilwell and you're also bringing in Morris for Jackson, I think that is worth a -8 in that sort of situation. Maxim says Sterling and Chilwell out for Ward-Prowse and Trippier for a -4. I like it, I really do. Bowen, of course, might have a higher ceiling than Ward-Prowse, but you could argue that JWP is more consistent. I have Botman or Sterling and Arch out for Ward-Prowse and Morris for a -4. Good question. I think long-term the answer has to be Ward-Prowse and Trippier. That would be my preference. I think Morris is a good option for Game Week 7, but that's about it. It's just for 1 week, and I'll talk about this in the Transcripts video either tomorrow or on Wednesday. With Morris, he's a buy, but only for Game Week 7. After that, he's definitely a sell. So the next question is Chilwell to Trippier and Sterling to Bone for a -4. Yes, I really think these are all, good transfer plans. I like them, and I would go ahead with it. Just be careful with Sheffield United, because if they make a managerial change, even if it's an interim, for example, they could be, more resilient and have a managerial bounce against West Ham. But ultimately, Bowen and James Ward-Prowse are good options. Alif says, I already have Botman. Should I do Chilwell for Walker? Yeah, so pretty much we're on the same page. I think Walker would be one of the best options. Also refer to my best wildcard team video, where I discuss other defenders too. Gusto replacement, already have Colwill, Botman, Estupiñán, Kanji. Well, if you've got the funds, I'd either go to Trippier, or I would go to, not Walker in your case, since you already have a Kanji and the fixtures aren't good enough to justify a double up in Man City defensively, in my opinion. So I'd say either Trippier, Matty Cash, or to give another name, I mean, long term it'd be Odoggy, but I wouldn't buy him in this week. So yeah, let me know your situation there, but I think one of those 3 defenders are good long-term acquisitions. Chris says, best Sterling replacement, don't already own Son or Maddison. I'd still buy one of them in. If Maddison's clear, he's fit to play, I'd buy him. My only concern with Maddison, and it's always been the case, is his injury record. He seems to pick up too many knocks. Already this season, he had a bit of a problem after the United game, if I'm not mistaken, and now after the Arsenal game. So I can see some injuries happening for him, as it typically does when he was at Leicester, and that could be very frustrating. But if he stays fit, he is my pick over Heung-min Son. Raffle says, Chilwell and Sterling a keep for me. 2 good games. Chilwell will start both after Gusto red card, and Sterling will play striker position. Yeah, look, for the time being, I'm keeping them, but Chilwell is probably going to be benched. And after back-to-back 0-pointers, coming off the bench and getting booked, he's just been very frustrating. And ultimately, even if they both start, I'm not so sure. Yes, you're facing Burnley and, Fulham away, but are Chelsea good enough to win those games and for Chilwell and Sterling to get points? It doesn't look like it at the moment, but you make a good point. Sometimes patience is rewarded, and it could in such a scenario. Thanks, Dylan. Best replacement for Chilwell under 6 million. I mean, it seems very boring, but Botman, and I've said this from last week as well, before his goal, and of course now everyone's going to be flocking to him, but yeah, I think Botman's a very simple transfer. If not, a Doggy and I'd say Matty Cash are good long-term picks. Thoughts on Flecken to Raya? Now, my only issue with that is Raya's fixtures, and there's still the possibility of Ramsdale coming back in. I think Raya was a bit shaky yesterday. He made a great save, but for the first goal, I think he could have done better. He should have tipped over the bar. But of course, look, it's easier said than done. He's still a good goalkeeper. I wanted him to start over Ramsdale for a few weeks, and I think he'll continue to be the main goalkeeper in the Premier League and Champions League, but it is still a bit of a risk. I think with Flecken, he's still a good option, but with the injuries to Rico Henry and Ben Mee, it is very concerning. And conceding 3 goals at home to Everton is just a big shock. So, yeah, it's a decent transfer. I think it could pay off for you, but it's still extremely risky. Should I bring Salah for Son before Game Week 9 or keep Son? Not before Game Week 9. Why would you do that when Son plays Liverpool, of course, difficult fixture, but then he faces Luton Town away. So if you've got Son right now, I would say maybe sell him around Game Week 9. Don't sell him ahead of Luton Town away. I promise you that could be catastrophic whilst Salah plays Brighton away. And I think Son will probably outscore him there. Of course, it's all, there's more to FPL than fixtures. Form plays a big part. Salah's been absolutely terrific. He's way more consistent than Son as well. But I wouldn't sell Son before Game Week 9. Yeah. Well, just to make it clear, I wouldn't sell him before Game Week 8. Before Game Week 9, Son to sell in Game Week 9, not too bad, despite him having good fixtures. Native Faith says start 1, Alisson, Tottenham away, or Turner. Ultimately, I think both concede, and then it just comes down to who makes more saves and bonus points, but I'd probably go for Alisson, which sounds ridiculous to say. And one defender, Saliba. I'd go for Saliba in that week. I think Arsenal are way more likely to keep a clean sheet, and if they do, could be a narrow win, 1 or 2-0, something like that, and I think Saliba has a good chance of bonus points if that's the case. Now, generally speaking, Estupiñán is a better FPL option. He's got more to his game in terms of goals and assists, FPL-wise, but I think Saliba this week. Should I bring Salah for Son? Yeah, we covered. I can't afford Son and Maddison isn't fit, so I'll go for Prowse or Bowen. I think one of those two is fine. I was talking about them quite a few times in this video. I think they are good purchases. Botman or Trippier? It really depends on funds. If money is no issue, Trippier, of course, is the one. But I think generally speaking, for people who want to bring in Salah and or Son in the midfield, I think Botman is probably just a better value for money. Matthew says keep Rashford or sell for Son. I think the way I'd play it is keep Rashford this week and then maybe sell to Son in Game Week 8. I think that's the way I'd go about it. Yeah, I'd rather replace Chilwell and Jackson first, but what you could do is sell like one of them, so Chilwell to maybe Trippier or Botman, or do Jackson to Morris as a 1-week punt, and then you do the midfielder transfer of Son in for Rashford. I think that's the way you can play it. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you very much. And also start Turner or Flecken. I'd still favour Flecken and Brentford, but it's not looking too good. I think both teams will score. But Brentford are still the better team in my opinion, although not by much, I think, so far. Hello, I got only 45 points, but I've been happy with Gordon. Yeah, look, this week I think the swings have been absolutely massive. So in my case, for example, doing the transfer of Alvarez to Watkins cost me 8 points, which I think is a bit harsh. I think the red card definitely changed the game there. Then you also have the decision to not take a -4 hit to go for Botman or Trippier. That would have been a swing of 20 points overall. So I think this week has been quite harsh in terms of variance. So I wouldn't be too downtrodden about it. You might still have the wild card in your back pocket, and you also might still have a good team. It just underperformed this week. Captain Haaland, Saka or Morris? Sounds boring, but probably Haaland. I haven't been particularly impressed by Wolves this season. I think Man City will win by 2 or 3. And Haaland is getting an absurd number of big chances. If he can actually finish the majority of them, which he hasn't been doing recently, he's going to be on course for, another hat-trick, another brace. So I'm probably going to say Haaland. I don't mind the Morris pick because he's got a double game week and Saka's got a good fixture. But I think Bournemouth could cause Arsenal some problems. I really do. No, Son is not essential. Having said that, he is a good option from Game Week 8 onwards, but let's put it into perspective. Yes, he's got a really high ceiling, and he's gotten 2 massive returns against Arsenal and Burnley, but in every other game he has blanked. I'm not a huge fan of those sorts of players who are really inconsistent, but on their day they go absolutely ballistic. Of course, ultimately at the end of the day, it's points. He's up there in terms of points scored for midfielders, but he is not essential. I do think he's a good transfer though from Game Week 8 onwards. I like to buy Morris. Yeah, I think that's fine for 1 week, but after that, I don't think so. Depends on your team, Daniel, but I could be a good time to wildcard. I think it could. Let's say, for example, someone has triple Chelsea, Jackson, Chilwell, and Gusto or Sterling, something like that. They might have no Newcastle players. They might want to bring in Salah, stuff like that. In that sort of scenario, I would possibly wildcard, but it all depends. Singh says, is it worth taking a punt on Mabama to Morris or roll and play Maddison? I think it is worth a punt, I'll be real with you, but it all depends on Maddison's fitness. If he's available, I would just probably play him and avoid that transfer, have 2 frees in Game Week 8, and then maybe you can bring in Heung-min Son to target Luton Town away, or you can bring in Mohamed Salah in Game Week 9, or potentially make some other transfers. But I personally prefer playing Maddison as things stand. If he is out though, and it's possible, once we get more updates later in the week, that's where you could just take the punt, obviously bench Maddison if you wish, and maybe he's back for Game Week 8, and that could be the best case scenario for you. But as things stand, assuming Maddison's fit, I'd probably, I'm not saying risk it, but I'd probably roll and wait for things to develop later. I bench Saka for Chilwell. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why. If you're saying you did it this week facing Tottenham, I'm not sure why you did it, to be fair. But look, sometimes people do say things in hindsight. That is true. Even I've done it as well. But I think benching Saka for Chilwell is something you should never do, really, in my opinion. Sungesso says, hi Dylan, I'm planning to play a 3-5-2 in Game Week 7. These are my defenders. Which 3 would you play? Botman, Estupinian, Cash, Kabore, and Udogi. Botman has to play. I would play Kabore for the double game week and probably Estupinian. That would be my free Sungesso. What would you do if you have Gusto and Chilwell, no money in the bank, 1 free transfer? Difficult, but I would bring in Botman, I think, or another Newcastle defender. It could be Cheryl Byrne. And the other transfer could potentially be either a Doggy, but that's a long-term pick, not for Game Week 7. And the other alternative is maybe Cash, of course. You should be able to afford both. I'd like to know if Iswald's good. Well, I've never been a big fan of him, even after his great start to the season. Great underlying numbers too. But he does have a bit of an injury problem right now. He is a doubt. But if he is fit, he's still fine to keep. He's not bad, but there are better alternatives for me, like Awani, Callum Wilson for the time being, Alvarez, Watkins, etc. Yeah, I don't mind captaining Morris, to be honest, but he is a Luton Town player. Despite how good the fixtures are, I don't trust Luton Town enough, I think, to captain. And look, it might seem very boring, but I made a similar mistake a few years ago captaining Dennis in the double game week. Of course, the red card is very unlucky, but that can happen. You know, you can get a really flop captaincy from a player from a team with a really good chance of going down. Rashford to Son? Yes, but I'd mainly target that in Game Week 8, not now. Bowen in for Sterling -4? I'd say yes, to be honest. You think it's good for wildcard? We covered. Start Chilwell or Kabore? I would go for Kabore right now. Should I bring Salah for Son? We've covered. Trying to spam the chat. We have covered that. Should I sell Maddison and Lamptey for Trippier and Bailey? I'd give Maddison more time in terms of wait for more updates throughout the week. I know Spurs don't have a Carabao Cup game, so you won't get a midweek update unless something comes out from a source, an external source, but I wouldn't really want to sell Maddison at the moment. I like Trippier, that's a great transfer, but I'm not too convinced about Bailey, to be fair. If you want an Aston Villa attacker, go for either Diaby or Ollie Watkins. Dixie says, I'm not convinced whether Salah is essential in the wildcard. No, I completely agree. And that's why in the wildcard video today, I showed 2 drafts, one with Salah and one without. So yeah, look, I completely agree with you. When I was building the Salah squad, I found myself kind of just downgrading other positions, and it's not ideal. Having Salah means you're less likely to have Trippier at the same time as Erling Haaland and have that balance throughout your squad. Plan to transfer Chilwell out for Botman or Joao Pedro out for Morris. Pick one. I think long-term Botman in for Chilwell is the transfer to make. But it all really depends, because if you're looking to wildcard in Game Week 8 or 9, then I'd make a case for doing Joao Pedro to Morris, because I think he has a higher ceiling than Botman this week. I know he scored and got a 13 points or something like that, 12-pointer in Game Week 6, but Botman's not going to do that every single week. That was his first goal in a long time, I think. So I think if I'm playing it for 1 week, it's Joao Pedro to Morris, definitely. Best mid for 5.5 million. Gordon, if I'm not mistaken, but he is 1 yellow card away from suspension. That is the big concern. And I think he might have gone up in price already, to be fair. So maybe that's not going to be true. Still, we've got 140 people watching, so I appreciate those who tune in. The thousands of people who overall watch my videos every single time. You're massively appreciated. Let's try to get this stream to over 100 likes, especially if I've answered your question or you're finding this useful, entertaining in any sort of way. I probably wouldn't, but maybe you are, and I do appreciate it. Let me just get this up. I don't want to get this wrong. So in terms of a 5.5 million midfielder, yeah, I'll be honest, it's not great reading, but I'm probably looking at Bailey or Jensen there. They're probably the best ones. Anderson could be all right, but yeah, I'm mainly looking at Bailey, I think, from those sorts of options with the fixture run. He is going to be benched, though, on occasion. That's not really ideal. I mean, yeah, he's only got 1 start this season, so he's really just going to be an impact sub, and he can do well off the bench, but yeah, I'm not a big fan, to be quite frank, with these 5.5 million and under midfielders. I think Jensen's all right. He's kind of a random player, can pop up every now and then with a contribution, but unless I'm really, missing somebody, I don't really think there's anyone worth it. Unless you just have a bench fodder option, even Anderson, and then reinvest that money in the forward line. But yeah, I'm not too sure about that. I'd like to buy Kabore and Morris. Look, I'll be honest. I know they have a double game week, but I'd be very careful with the Luton Town players. I definitely. Well, it really depends, because if you're selling Chilwell and Jackson to those two for a -4, it could still pay off, in 1 week. But I'm not a big fan of kind of undoing your team or taking massive hits for Burnley or Luton Town players. I think Morris should be the priority from those two. When City play Arsenal next week, it makes sense to keep both City and Arsenal players in my team, right? Not necessarily. Long term, yes. Man City and Arsenal players are still good. So Saka and Saliba, they're good options. I talk about both of them in the Wildcard team video. Also the likes of Alvarez, Haaland and Walker. So from that perspective, I agree. But, if, for example, you're looking to Wildcard in Game Week 9, I'd be tempted to get rid of some of these players, especially the Arsenal ones, and maybe do Saka to Son for 1 week in Game Week 8. So it just really depends on when you Wildcard. But ultimately, yeah, I think long term, you're right. Maddison or Trippier? Trippier this week, but overall, I think Maddison is the better FPL option at the moment. Sell or hold Eze? I've had him since Game Week 1, and even though his data looks great, Palace just don't seem good enough. Yeah, look, I still think Eze is a good option, but I'd probably move him on to a West Ham midfielder, or let's say, for example, Maddison's fit. You can go to him, of course. I'm guessing you have him already. Yeah, I think the teams you really want to kind of pile up on in the midfield include Spurs, West Ham. Maybe have one midfielder from the likes of Arsenal, Man City, Man United, Liverpool. But I think, yeah, West Ham and Spurs midfielders look good for you. Abhishek says, I have a decent starting 11, barring a doggy versus Liverpool for Game Week 7, but I have Mabama, Gusto and Baldock on my bench. Should I sell one of the 3? And if yes, who? That's a good question. The thing is with Mabama, yes, you could maybe go to... Well, no, you can't in your case. You'd have to take a hit to get Morris. So I think if you were to get rid of one, it's probably Gusto. The problem is you don't have enough to go to Botman, but maybe you can go for Burn instead, and that's fine. So if you were to make a transfer, I think Gusto to Botman is probably to Burn is the best one. However, I think in your situation, it might be worth rolling Abhishek and then having 2 free transfers in Game Week 8, and that's where you can bring in Botman, who might be your preference overall, and then you can make another transfer elsewhere, which obviously would require a downgrade to afford him. Play Chilwell or Estupinian? I play Estupinian at the moment. Start Darwin or Sterling, or move Sterling to Bowen? That's a good question. I think Darwin did very well last time at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but completely different scenario this time round. I think Spurs are looking better this season. Now, it is a mixture of a new manager bounce, you could argue. They also had a very strong start with Conte, but I think I'd actually move Sterling to Bowen and start him. I think that's what I'd do. Patches has got Jimenez 2 weeks ago, but he blanked hard. I get he's not the same player like a few years ago, but for 5.4, would you even consider him as an option? Quite frankly, no. I wouldn't consider him as an option. He was a really good FPL pick around 3 years ago. When I was first making videos on this channel and streams, I was talking about Jimenez a lot, that combination between him and Adama Traore, but I would not pick him at all. Should get rid of Maddison and Lamptey for Trippier and Botman for -4? Once again, I wouldn't sell Maddison yet unless he's confirmed out. I like Trippier and Botman. They're good transfers, but ultimately, you're saying get rid of Maddison and Lamptey for 2 defenders, but it doesn't really work that way in FPL unless you're playing Sky Fantasy. but there's no hits in that game, so I'm not sure exactly what the situation is. Hey, mate, thoughts on Morris captain? I'd be open to it. I'll be honest. I'm not a big fan of Luton Town. What I mean by that is, from an FPL perspective, I don't trust them enough. And as a result, I'm not sure if I actually captain him myself. But he is a decent pick. He should be in contention because I don't think there are particularly many great picks for the captaincy this week. You've got no, I wouldn't say Son. Saka against Bournemouth away, Haaland away to Wolves. You've got Morris of the double game week. And apart from that, maybe Trippier against Burnley, Callum Wilson as well. Bowen, but there's not a clear standout, I'd say. So, yeah, I'm not completely against it, but I don't trust Luton Town. Would Edouard play in Game Week 7? I can't tell you that right now. I don't know enough about the injury, but he is a doubt. In terms of what was the injury, I'll give you an update now. I don't know the exact injury it was. I only know that he got a problem towards the end of the game. So let me just pick that up and give you the latest quotes provided by Roy Hodgson. Yeah, so here we go. So I think it's a thigh injury. So it's that / a tight hamstring. He's currently, he's ruled out. He's potentially going to return for the 30th of September, so next weekend, but he's currently being assessed. So, yeah, look, we don't have any concrete updates yet, but it's basically a thigh injury or a tight hamstring. So, yeah, let's wait and see. I wouldn't expect it to be too long, but I'm not a doctor, and I also don't know enough about the injury to really comment on it with an educated guess. Trippier's score was more the opponent. Look, I think Trippier's a good option overall. He always has been, but I think it's more the opponent, if I'm being quite honest. The thing is, he plays Burnley next week, so there is a chance he could get another attack and return and clean sheet, but I don't see him getting another 18-pointer. Start Saliba or Taylor? I know he's got a double game week, but I'd still start Saliba, I think. I don't really see Taylor and Burnley keeping clean sheets. Yeah, I think I have answered that. Would you bench any of Bruno, Maddison, Saka, Diaby, and Boomer or Awani over Wissa? Yeah, it's tricky to be honest. I think I'd bench Wissa from those lot. Maybe Diaby potentially against Brighton, but I could also see the way Brighton play as suiting Diaby and Aston Villa. And like I said, Aston Villa have a good record against Brighton, so it's difficult, but I definitely wouldn't bench Bruno, Maddison if fit, Saka, even in Boomer. And Awani has been very consistent, so I think I'd bench Wissa there. Of course, if Maddison's out, then that makes that decision for you. Crow TP says, hi Dylan, I am considering taking Bowen from Boomer. I think this week Bowen outscores him, so I don't mind it at all. Overall, I think they're both similar level, and I think in Boomer could still match or outscore Bowen over the next 5 game weeks, but ultimately I think Bowen is a good transfer, and I don't mind that at all. Trippier won't be getting 3 assists every week. Yeah, I think that is possible as well with the Champions League, and I think Newcastle will go strong against City. There is a possibility for Man City to rotate quite heavily in the Carabao Cup, and Newcastle could see it as an opportunity to go through, make a real statement in the competition, and maybe win it, and build upon their final last season. So you make a good point. I still think Trippier will start in Game Week 7, but rotation will be a concern. Trippier or Morris for 1 free transfer. I prefer Trippier simply because beyond Game Week 7, I think he's a good option, and I can't say the same about Morris. And it's not like he's bad beyond Game Week 7, but really you want him for the double and that's it. Wissa for Morris, yeah, I don't mind that for a 1 week punt, but after, I would sell Morris. Bench one of Estupiñán, Akanji, Saliba. Might sound crazy, but I'd bench Estupiñán. I think he'll blank actually, but of course I could be wrong. I am still really far behind, by the way, so I do apologise. Thank you, Safir, for the shout out. I appreciate it. What do you think about Morris 1 week punt then wildcard Game Week 8? Yeah, I don't mind that, but I wouldn't just wildcard for that transfer. And with wildcards in general, I'd like to make at least 6, bare minimum 6 transfers to justify the wildcard. And I'm talking about key kind of transfers, not like, oh, my backup goalkeeper and my 4-point family and forward to another one. Ramsdale or Steele replacement? Well, they're both sells ultimately. Steele seems to just be rotating far too much, and I know Brighton have a good run of fixtures from Game Week 10 onwards, but we'll still start all of those games, not necessarily. Ramsdale seems to have lost his spot right now, so maybe Ramsdale just because he's more expensive. So Ramsdale to Leno, and then maybe Steele to Areola in the weeks to come, and you can rotate those two. That should be fine, but I wouldn't take hits for goalkeepers if you can. Of course, in your situation, it might be justified because both of them are at risk of not playing. Hi Dylan, would you keep Gvardiol or transfer out for cash? Keep him for now. I know he could be rotated even against Wolves, but I'd keep him for that game. Sarr for 4.5 from Spurs. Yeah, true, but he's not really ideal. He's not someone I'd want to start. He's really just bench fodder. Clean shaven Dylan's back. Yeah, I've seen a few kind of comments, in videos and stuff, and it just cracks me up, to be fair. I got 55 points, and Matoma is on my bench. Yeah, look, I'm not going to play, this kind of hindsight merchant. I'm just saying personally, I'm being real. I wouldn't have benched him against Bournemouth, but after you got benched, you're kind of feeling, oh, I made the right decision. So things change very quickly. You're a bit unlucky in the sense that he was benched and yet still got 14 points. So from that perspective, you are unlucky, but I think Matoma against Bournemouth at home isn't really worth benching, in my opinion. I have to start one. Probably still Leno for me. I think Fulham could get a result against Chelsea, of course. We all know this. And of course, Alisson can get a result against Spurs, but I see Spurs as more likely to score than Chelsea against Fulham. Sold Chilwell for cash this week, good move. Yeah, I don't think cash is my favourite option, but he's got a good fixture run, so it's not bad. Rashford to Son? Yes, but I'd do it in game week 8, not necessarily now. Would you play Johnston United or Turner? That's a great question. I don't expect either of them to do well. It's really about 1 to 3 points and who gets the extra save point or whatever it may be, who concedes fewer goals. I think I'd maybe go for Turner. Waising says, Justin, how's everyone? Good to see you. Start Cash or Stupinian? I'd start Stupinian, but that's mainly just because of his attacking threat. I know Cash also has it, but not to the same level as a Stupinian. Sterling to Diaby this week for future games? Yeah, I think that's a good transfer. 67 points, Chelsea finished me completely. I'm doing even worse, to be honest, so yeah. Couldn't afford Leno, Verbergen, or Flecken. Yeah, I know, it's kind of frustrating, but Leno, he actually doesn't have great fixtures if you think about it, but the rotation between him and Areola works really well over the next 6. Colwill or Chilwell to Newcastle defender? At this point, Chilwell. He's more expensive. Colwill's actually starting games. Chilwell isn't. And if they both start, of course, I prefer Chilwell. That's why I went for him. But I think I'd just sell Chilwell and go to either Trippier or Botman. Rashford to Bowen on a 1-week punt, worth it? Yeah, as a 1-week punt, definitely. Wilson Decore or any Everton mid against Luton? Yeah, true. Look, if you're targeting 1 game week, I think you can target that Luton Town fixture, and Decore could be fine. So from that perspective, yeah, I don't mind it, but Decore is not someone I'd trust long-term, of course. Yeah, again, I've dodged all the returns from Villa assets, just like the last time they braced. Yeah, I had Watkins last time they played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. He scored, he did very well, but didn't have him this time round. I literally just sold him, which was very frustrating. And I genuinely believe if it wasn't for the red card, I don't think Watkins returns in that game. But that's football, the fine margins, and it also has an impact on FPL, of course. Charvik, we have answered that question, so I'm not going to go through it. Salah or Son? Well, overall, Salah's my preference. He's more consistent, but it's also a question of budget. And you can make a better squad, especially on the wild card, with Son over Salah. So it's a difficult one, really. I think if money is no issue, Salah's the clear victor all day long. Odegaard or Rashford this week? Odegaard. Douglas Luiz, a 5-point family midfielder. Yeah, true, he's on set pieces, including penalties. That's a good shout, but once again, I'm not saying your suggestions are bad, by the way. They're good suggestions, probably better than the ones I made, but I don't trust any of these players necessarily at 5.5 million or below. Worth to sell Chilwell for Kabore? If it's for free, I'd be happy to do it, I guess, but really, Kabore is a 1-week punt, and that's it. Start Dean or Region? Own Dean since Game Week 3. This week, I'd start Region. He was ill, I think, heading into the Burnley game. Then he was subbed out towards the end. But, yeah, I think Region, based on the fixture and the clean sheet chances, I think Brighton will score. Aston Villa may win the game, but I still think Brighton score. Trippier will finish at 196 points if he has to keep his average points per game. I don't think he will, to be honest. And look, I'm happy to be proven wrong. I didn't expect him to get 198, I think it was last season. Or maybe it was 196, but I don't think it will be the case. This was the first time we saw the Trippier from last season, I think. Not just in terms of the assists, but also in terms of the underlying numbers, the creativity, the amount of chances he created. And honestly, it's mainly down to Sheffield United for me. Alex says, I'm on Wildcard Gameweek 10. Spurs run from 10 isn't great, so a doggy goes. Currently looking at Stupinian, Zuma, Cash, Botman, Bayer, maybe Pinnock instead of Zuma. Yeah, look, there's so many fixture swings happening every single week. So in Gameweek 8, Spurs have some good fixtures, but it's not necessarily long-term. Same with West Ham as well from now. You've also got Brighton having bad fixtures now, but good ones in Gameweek 10. Man City, their fixtures turn for the worse in Gameweek 8. So there is a lot to contend with, and that's what makes the wild card a bit more difficult this season in terms of pinpointing the exact time frame where you should use the wild card. But ultimately, I'd say from now until, let's say, Gameweek 19 even, you could use the wild card whenever. Chill replacement got 2 Newcastle, Diaz and a doggy. I would look at maybe Cash then, or difficult one, but I think Cash is good long-term simply for the fixtures and a bit of attacking potential. Saliba's still a good option long-term, same with Walker. So I'd say maybe Walker or Cash. Trippier is so important to them that they really can't risk him being out for a prolonged period. Yeah, look, I agree with you, but I still think there is the possibility of rotation or at least early substitutions. But I think Trippier... Look, when I look at defensive rotation and Livramento, and I know he's a right-back, he can also play on the left-hand side, and I think Burn is actually more subject to rotation than Trippier. So you make a fair point. There's a good discussion going on about Trippier and possible rotation. I still think he could be benched from time to time, but not against Burnley. I don't think that'll be the case. Linus says, I've done a -4, but I'm tempted to hit the wild card instead. Yeah, it cancels out the -4, exactly that. That's true. And if you take a -8, -12, the same thing. So if you are going to wild card, be aware that it does cancel out the hit you made. Of course, the transfer stay, but you don't lose any points from it. Soufal or Kabore? Well, long term, I'd still say Soufal. West Ham have a better defense and better fixtures long term for me. But in Gameweek 7, who scores more? I'd probably still go for Kabore simply for the double, but there's not much in it, to be fair. And I'm not a big fan of either long term, to be quite frank with you. Mitoma or Wissa to sell this week for funds? The thing is, look, I hate to say this, but it really depends on which midfielders and forwards you have already. But in isolation, I'd rather sell Wissa and keep Mitoma, especially from Gameweek 10 onwards. And even Mitoma against Villa could do well. And Liverpool, that's not a bad fixture for him necessarily. I think City is the only game where I'd bench Mitoma. One transfer from midfielder, Mbeumo, Gordon, Diaby or James Ward-Prowse. Look, there's a lot of love for Gordon at the moment, and rightly so. I think what puts me off Gordon, though, is the fact that he's 1 yellow card away from suspension. And yes, Harvey Barnes could be out quite some time, but you've also got Anderson. You've got a few other options in there, like Almiron, who can play on both flanks. So, look, Gordon's a fine pick, but the one I'd go for from those lot is Diaby. And James Ward-Prowse is still fine. Mbeumo, solid option. He was in my wildcard draft, but Diaby, I think, is the kind of most nailed on for me. Sefes has got 75 points to Skemig, but I regret not doubling up on Newcastle defence. I regret not having any of them, to be honest, but fair play. I now have Alvarez and Foden. Which one would you replace first? That's a great question. It's difficult because I'd probably say Foden. I still believe Alvarez has been more impressive from an FPL perspective this season. Despite Foden arguably having better performances overall. The reason why I'd say Foden is because you've got more alternatives in the midfield. To start, Sterling or Ward-Prowse? Yeah, I do. I look about 5 or 10 years younger. I have to say, I prefer how I look with a beard, but not much, when it just grows out of control. Best goalkeeper to bring in? Depends, though. Are you looking for 1 week? Are you looking for 5 weeks? Look, with goalkeepers, generally, you don't want to take a 1-week punt. So, best long-term goalkeepers for me are Leno and Areola as a goalkeeper combination. So, if you've got Areola, I'd maybe bring in Leno, and you can do that sort of thing. However, if you don't, let's say you don't have Areola, I wouldn't necessarily bring in Leno because he's got some pretty average fixtures to say the least over the next 5 or 6. So I'd say Pope could be the one. Just really good long-term fixtures, especially over the next 4. So I think Nick Pope is your safest bet. Thank you for the super chat. Let me just bring this up by Donba32. Massively appreciate. The same goes for all the patrons, channel members, and those that send in super chats. So the message is, I have this bench. Turner, Estupinian, Colwill, Wissa. Should I use the bench boost? The bench boost after wildcard needs transfers to strain out the team. Yeah, look, so when we break it down, it's a decent bench. You could get a decent score. And when I look at a bench boost, I would be happy with 15 plus points, especially in a single game week. And that bench could definitely get 15 plus points. However, in terms of how I see the games going, I think Turner concedes. And look, I don't want to put you off because you might be really settled on it. And if you are still confident about it, back your gut, honestly, because I remember with Marco a few weeks ago, he was asking me about it. I said I wouldn't bench boost. Then he had Gusto and players like that on his bench. He got like 20, 30 points there. So it's really difficult to judge these sorts of situations. But I think Turner will concede. I don't see a high ceiling for him. Estupinian, as good as he is, I think he'll blank. That's a personal prediction of mine. Then you look at Colwill. Yeah, fair enough. Chelsea could keep a clean sheet in a 0-0 draw, and that's fine. Wiss is a decent option. So it's a decent bench. It's worth bench boosting, but I'm a bit concerned about one or two of those picks, to say the least. And I think you could have a better bench boost later in the season, either in a double game week or when you have better fixtures for your players, or even just better FPL options in general. So it's up to you there. Let me know what you're kind of leaning towards, but I think I wouldn't. If it was me, I wouldn't, but it is a good bench, I have to say that. Alex says, finally got my first good game week of the season thanks to Newcastle defenders. Yeah, that's what I mean. The margins are so tight, and sometimes it just takes that one transfer to transform your season, so it's good to hear that you brought them in. I want to get rid of Chilwell and Rashford. Who first? Chilwell. For me, Chilwell has to be the priority. I'd go to a Newcastle defender, and as for Rashford, yeah, I'd probably sell him maybe in Game Week 8 to Son. You could do that. But in Game Week 7, I'd sell Chilwell to a Newcastle player. Join the Discord server if you like daily off-stream discussions. Yeah, exactly that way, saying. Also, there's captaincy polls. You've got the bots that update you about injuries, team news. So whenever there's a lineup, you will find out first on the Discord server. You've even got a bot to make some transfer suggestions for you. So it's very simple to use. Everything's organized. You've got so many different channels for different needs. And if you have any feedback, you want to see something introduced, then you can let me know. For those of you who are fantasy players, there's also a channel for that too. So Barati says Salah for Son or Trippier for Gusto. Trippier for Gusto. As much as I like Salah, I wouldn't necessarily sell Son, especially before he plays Luton Town in Game Week 8. So Abraham says, hey Dylan, I did the best decision last week getting Chilwell out and getting Botman. Good stuff. Now this game week I have one free transfer. Should I get rid of Sterling or Onana? I'd rather sell Sterling. I know he's got Burnley away and he could do very well in Game Week 8, but I'd rather sell him. I don't trust Chelsea offensively. Sterling's very frustrating. And as for Onana, as bad as United have been, they are still capable of some clean sheets over the next few fixtures. They've got a good fixture run now, and that's why I told people to hold him ahead of Burnley. So I'd sell Sterling. Don't trust both, but which should go out? I'd sell Sterling. Diaby or Foden in for Sterling? Diaby. You know, Foden might be the better option overall in this current setup for City, but Diaby has better fixtures, and when you mix both of them into account and the price, I think Diaby's the better pick. Yala says start Areola or Onana. I'd go for Areola, but Onana's a decent pick this week. I don't mind him. Do you think Tony joins Chelsea or Arsenal? I don't know, but Arsenal apparently have stepped up their interest. That's come out today. I'd like to think Arsenal, and I think... yeah, the likes of Nketiah and Jesus, they're not enough to lead Arsenal to where they want to be. I really like Jesus as an overall player, but he's not a good finisher. I've always said that. And as for Nketiah, I don't think he's good enough to lead the line for Arsenal. Obviously I want him to do well and I back him, but you have to be realistic about these things. So I'm going to say Arsenal, but maybe I'm quite biased in that response. Andrew says playing a different formation for this week, bringing in Morris for Jackson and benching in Boomer. I like the Morris transfer. It's a good one. I'm a bit unsure about Mbumo bench, to be fair, but good transfer overall. Good move and a decent situation to be in. Best goalkeeper to bring in. I think you asked this earlier. Nick Pope is my general answer, I think. Yeah, Domba, look, I don't want to discourage you from something you might feel very positive about. If you have a good feeling about it, trust your instinct, follow it. Trust me, because... like I said, there was a situation around a month ago now where someone was looking at their bench and they had a good feeling about it. And I said, look, for me personally, I wouldn't do it. And in the end, it was the wrong decision, you could argue. And a lot comes down to luck, of course. But based on my predictions of how the games are going to go, I probably wouldn't. Is Turner Areola a viable option? Not for me. Because one, Turner could be replaced by Vlachodimos very soon. And we're seeing reports already that Vlachodimos will become the #1 goalkeeper. And two, you're relying on West Ham and Nottingham Forest. Now, you could argue and say, well, Dylan, when you're talking about the wildcard, one of your drafts had Leno and Areola, and Fulham aren't necessarily much better than Nottingham Forest. That's true. but Leno has a really high ceiling. He's the undisputed number one, and he also gets so many saves and bonus points. He's currently the highest scoring goalkeeper in FPL, so I think it's a bit different in this case, and I wouldn't go for Turner and Areola as your goalkeeper combination. I know why you want to do it. It allows you to invest more in the likes of Trippier and or Salah, but I wouldn't do that. Is Leno ranked 5th in terms of points? I think he is. I can double check that for you. Yeah, I'll show you that right now. I don't think I can show you with this screen. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do... I'm just going to check myself, actually. But I want to show you a few different screens first. So, the FDR for Fantasy Football Hub, Aston Villa are now top. So things change very quickly in this FDR. Luton Town, West Ham are in the top 3. Man United, Burnley as well. Of course, the double game week does sway things quite significantly. In terms of the bottom 5, you've got Sheffield United, Chelsea, Man City, Brentford and Brighton. So definitely time to sell these Chelsea assets, especially after Burnley away. And even Man City have a tough run, but I'd still recommend having 1 or 2 of their players. Alvarez is still a good pick. Haaland, of course, nothing needs to be said there. And the defenders offer good value. The only concern is rotation. Predicted points, we'll revisit this, but Haaland is top with 8.7. Morris is second with 8.1. There's a lot of love for these Burnley and Luton Town players, which I don't necessarily agree with, by the way. So yeah, you've got Kaminsky, Trafford, Burke, Salah, Son, Ramsey, Bruno Fernandes and Bell. So many Luton Town and Burnley players in the top 10. Trust me, you're not going to see that very often this season. And in terms of price changes, Morris is projected to go up. Maybe not today, but he should within the next few days or so. And in terms of price drops, Sterling, Jackson, Ben Mee, Trent Alexander-Arnold are all projected to go down. Even Isak and Stones is very close. So quite a lot of transfer activity already. But remember, there is a midweek game, not one midweek game, there's many midweek games in the Carabao Cup. Arsenal face Brentford, Man City face Newcastle, so some big games there, and there could be injuries, so let's keep an eye out. And also, there's some more updates that we need to hear from the likes of Edouard and Maddison and the potential injury problems. If you look at Draft Hound, the transfer they recommend to me is Chilwell to Trippier. And I have to say, very tempted by that. Also, Botman. What I might do this week, and I'll talk about this in the team selection video, is bring in Trippier and Botman for Chilwell and for Rico Henry, who's out for the entire season. And I know you might think that's really knee-jerky, and you might be right, but I was even prepared to take a -4 hit going into game week 6 before their mega hauls against Sheffield United. And the reason why I'm looking to take that -4 is because I think Estupiñán will blank against Aston Villa, and I can bench him in game week 7. And it also gives me the funds to do Saka to Son in game week 8, when Arsenal play Man City and Spurs play Luton Town, and then I can wildcard out of that in game week 9. So that's kind of the plan I'm looking to do. I'll talk about this in the team selection video, of course, but that is one set of transfers I could make, and I can be very aggressive. But one thing I've done this season, and probably the main kind of, let's say, factor towards my poor start, is making too many reactionary transfers. I think that's something I've done very poorly this season, and I need to address it. And in terms of some other stats, you could say, the most transferred in player this week is Sven Botman, Heung-min Son is second, and Trippier third. And if you are aware, or if you're unaware, there is this transfer curse going on. So in Game Week 2, the most transferred in player was Chilwell. He got 1 point. In Game Week 3, it was Mbeumo. He blanked. Game Week 4 was Sterling. Blanked. Game Week 5, it was Heung-min Son, he blanked. In Game Week 6, it was Alvarez, he blanked. So this thing has been just out of hand, to be fair. But Burnley at home is still a good fixture. You would expect Newcastle to keep the clean sheet, but it would not surprise me if they did and Botman was benched. You know how FPL has been so far this season, but these are the transferred in figures. There's already a lot of transfer activity. Over 200,000 managers have brought in Botman, Trippier, and Heung-min Son. In terms of the FPL.team and stuff like that, I'll probably save that for the team selection video, but there's a lot to cover in that video. And like I said, I could be very aggressive with my transfer. So let's go back to my team, how I did in game week 6 and 61 points. It was looking good on the Saturday, but Sunday just absolutely killed me, and I've gone down from around 1.6 million to 2.7. So things are looking horrendous so far this season, but the gaps between ranks are still very, very marginal, and there's a long way to go. Bring in Botman or Trippier. I think if money's no issue, I'd go for Trippier. I also think he's a bit more nailed on, ironically enough, although both of them would be kind of as nailed as you get in that Newcastle team, but I'd probably go for Trippier. Now, look, I'll be honest, before the Sheffield United game, I was saying Botman, and maybe that Trippier performance swayed me, and it does have to do with Sheffield United being very poor. Ideally, I'd have both, if I'm being quite honest with you, but you might not be able to if you also go for Salah in the midfield. So, look, maybe I should just stick with my answer from last week in the deadline. That's what I typically do, stick with my answers, but yeah, I think Trippier definitely makes a case of being a great option. You know what? Simply because of price, I think I'm going to say Botman, but it's literally because of value, and it might allow you to go for Salah in the midfield. You could also cover Newcastle defensively with Burn or Nick Pope, but Trippier certainly has the most attacking potential and the bonus points. Mr. Parky says Ariella, Turner, Trippier, Cash, Botman, Udogie, Baldock, Salah, Saka, Son, and Mbumo, Gordon, Archer, Alvarez, Haaland. Yeah, it's a good wildcard team. I can see why you're a bit concerned about Gordon. At his price and below, he's probably the best, but he is 1 yellow card away from suspension, so be very careful with him. 4 yellow cards already. It could be another Jackson. So that's always going to be in the back of your mind, and the yellow cards only reset once a team has played their 19th Premier League game, I think it is. So there's a long while for him to kind of withstand before getting the suspension or getting the suspension cleared. So, yeah, in terms of your wildcard team, I think my main concern is Ariella Turner as a goalkeeper duo. I'd rather go for Leno over Turner, just because Leno is such a good FPL option in general, despite Fulham being a bit suspect defensively. Your defense is absolutely fine. Apart from Baldock, I would sell him. The midfield, really good. It's a good midfield, not much to change there. Maybe Diaby in for Mbumo, but Saka, Salah, Son, I mean, that's the ideal midfield three for me. And as for Alvarez and Haaland, good forward partnership. But my main concern, I think, with your team is Baldock and your goalkeeper pairing. Yeah, look, it depends, Hassan, who you're selling. But Sterling to Bowen, I'd be prepared to do it. I would. You know how many double game weeks there will be? I can't tell you because things change very quickly, but there will be another double game week. That's already confirmed between Man City and Brentford. So their game will be suspended because Man City will be in the Club World Cup following their Champions League triumph. So they will have a double game week because it has to be rescheduled. So yeah, there will be another double game week for sure. In terms of how many more there will be afterwards, we're not too sure yet. It all depends on any kind of postponements we may get and how that impacts things later on. Domba says a lot of wildcard game weeks coming up. When will you wildcard? I haven't decided yet. A few weeks ago, I was talking about game week 8. At the moment, literally, as I was saying a few minutes ago, my transfer plans, if I go ahead with it and be very, let's say, proactive or very aggressive, it could be game week 9 where I wildcard because I wouldn't have no Saka and I'd want him against Chelsea and Sheffield United, and I think the fixtures will turn soon for Arsenal. So there's a few things that I could change, but basically, if I bring in Botman and Trippier this week and bring in Son next week and target Luton Town and the fixtures in front of me, I think that's what could happen for me, and I'll wildcard in game week 9, but it's not set in stone. As for the second question, yeah, look, in terms of wildcard teams, because every single week is potentially a good time to wildcard, I'll probably do a wildcard team video for game week 8. There's already one out for game week 7, which I uploaded earlier today. There'll probably be one for game week 9 and 10 as well. The only kind of exception to that, by the way, is if I find that the wildcard team for game week 10 is the same as game week 9. In that case, I'm not just going to repeat, the exact same team and make another video for no reason. So, unless there's actual some changes I'd make to the team, that's when I'd make some separate videos. Twister Parker says, I wanted Sterling and Shaw out. Did not want a -4 for players I don't want, so wildcarded. Fair enough. There's a few things I think you could do to improve the team. Overall, it's really good, but I think Baldock and the goalkeeper combination is a bit worrying for me. So this is my plan for future game week, says Milner. Sell Wisser to Archer this week if Maddison is fit. Game week 8 and Boomer to Anderson and take a -4 for Saka, Bruno and get Salah. Overall, I think that's quite sensible. I'm still not too convinced about Anderson and his minutes, especially if Barnes is back fairly soon. But it's a good set of transfer plans, and overall, Salah is a better option than Bruno. And despite Saka having some bad fixtures, I'd only go without Saka in game week 8 against Man City. I'd still like him against Chelsea and Sheffield United, but that's a personal opinion of mine. No, he was 5th, now Leno is 10th. Yeah, he was 5th before the Sunday games, that is true. Can I use wildcard and triple captain in the same week? No, you can't use 2 chips at the same time. You can only use 1. So if you use the wildcard, triple captaincy will be unavailable to you until game week 8. Who would you sell first from Saka, Rashford and Bruno? Probably Rashford. Having said that, and I keep saying this every week, but I think the nature of the opponents coming up, I think could suit Rashford. So, look, long term, I still think Bruno's better than him, but not by much. And Rashford could outscore him, and you might be kicking yourself. But ultimately, you know, for me, who is the worst one of the three right now? It's Rashford. Game Week 8 wildcard. It's still a possibility for me, but if I go ahead with the transfers I was talking about, I could wildcard in Game Week 9. So, yeah, Game Week 8 or 9 is a serious possibility for me, but I'd lean more towards Game Week 9 in my team situation. But it all depends on my transfers this week and what I end up doing or what my plans are for the next few weeks too. So who's the replacement? Verbogen, Flecken or Johnston? Probably Flecken still, but it's simply because with Verbruggen and Jason Still, there's too much rotation. I don't want to go near that. And as for Johnston, you've got Dean Henderson knocking on the door. Johnston's a fine pick, by the way, if he keeps the spot, but that isn't a guarantee. If I was Tony, I'd go Arsenal. I think it is the better place to go now, but things change very quickly in football, and there are some concerns with Arsenal. I think last season was more exciting. They looked a bit more convincing last season, but it's early days, and let's see how it all goes. Balogun is at Monaco. He missed 2 penalties the other day in a single game. What was your personal Arsenal lineup for City game? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there is a rumour that Declan Rice, Martinelli, Trossard and Partey could be back for Man City, and that would be massive. I'm telling you, all 4 of them were massive misses against Tottenham. Declan Rice came off injured in the second half. Even Timber, who's out until March, is a massive blow, but having those 4 players back would be massive. And if, you know, they're all fit and available, raring to go, my lineup would be Ryan goal, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Sinchenko, Partey, Rice and Odegaard. I'd go a bit more defensive if they're all available, of course. I'd go for Martinelli, Saka and Jesus, and I'd bring Trossard on as an impact sub. He could do really well that way. So that'll be my lineup. It'd be absolutely perfect with the exception of Timber being out. I'm still a bit skeptical about it, but hopefully all those 4 players are back and we have a really good game between Arsenal and Man City. I'm telling you, if those 4 players are missing, it doesn't matter if City have no Rodri or whatever it may be, City will win the game comfortably. Labovic says, hello, should I get transfer Wissa for Morris? I like that. You know, I've been talking about Wissa a lot. I liked him a lot, especially after his start to the season, but he has tailed off and Brentford aren't looking particularly great. So yeah, I would do it, but ultimately I would sell Morris in Game Week 8. Worth a -4 for Bowen or Morris? Yeah, I think so. But once again, as I typically say with these questions, it all really depends on who you're selling as well. I wanted to keep Leno, but then would have to go without Trippier. That's the problem. And also in terms of, you know, Salah as well, you have to factor all these things. Rank your top 5 goalkeepers in the Premier League this season. Difficult to say because it's just started, but Leno is probably number 1 for me. I think he's been absolutely terrific for Fulham. I think he's the main reason why they got a draw against Arsenal and why they beat Everton. So Leno's number 1. I think Alisson's up there. You know, he's typically, you know, he's always up there. He's so consistent, but I'd probably put Alisson. What else is there? I'm probably forgetting some names, by the way, so I do encourage you as well to leave your thoughts. I think Vicario has been very good, actually. So, yeah, it'd be Leno, Alisson, Vicario. I need 2 more names. Difficult one, I think. I think Turner's been good. I'm not sure if I put him in the top 5, but I think he's been pretty decent for them. I think for the other 2, I'd maybe say Edison. I know usually I don't really rate him too much as a shot stopper, but I think he's made some really big saves, especially against West Ham. And speaking of West Ham, I think Areola. So I think my top 5 would be that. In terms of order, I think Leno's number 1, then the rest you can basically make it up, but I think Vicario could be second. But that's my top 5 goalkeepers so far. Let me know if you disagree or if I've, you know, forgotten someone completely. You know, Foderingham had a really good game against Spurs. He hasn't been too bad overall, with the exception of Newcastle, but, you know, yeah, I'd probably have that as my top 5. Sanchez has been decent, by the way, for Chelsea. I have to say, he's been decent. He's a contender, but that's probably my top 5 so far. On Ivan Toney, I think Tottenham will be in for him in January. Yeah, it's possible. And I still think Spurs need a striker ultimately, but Son is more dangerous down the middle. I think on the left, he doesn't really offer much. He's not necessarily a great dribbler. I know some people will be like, what are you on about? But I just don't really see him as someone who can take on a man like that. I know he had that incredible goal against Burnley a few years ago, but things have changed. He'd be a great signing for Tottenham, but he'd also be a great signing for Chelsea and Arsenal, to be fair. I have Mateus Nunes, Chilwell, Joao Pedro, and Jackson. Yeah, look, Nunez could be a great signing for Man City, but I don't see him as an FPL option. Especially with Rodri out, Nunez could play an even deeper role. But the first one to sell would be Jackson, then Chilwell, but it's all team dependent, of course. And in terms of who do you get in, I think for Jackson, long term, I'd go for either Alvarez, Watkins, or Wilson. And for Chilwell, it'd be Trippier or Botman. If Tony wants to be the main man, yeah, look, when you put it that way, in terms of which team needs him most, I'd say Chelsea or Tottenham. But I think he'd be really important to Arsenal as well. Wildcard playing in Game Week 5, paid off in Game Week 6. Madison, Son, Foden, Leno, Mbeumo to sack in Game Week 8. Currently have no Man U or Arsenal. Yeah, good stuff. Excuse me. Yeah, I wouldn't get Saka in Game Week 8. I'd bring in Saka in Game Week 9. Because Saka plays Man City after this, and I wouldn't buy him for that. But against Chelsea away in Game Week 9, and also in Game Week 10 facing Sheffield United, a good captaincy choice. That's where I'd have Bukayo Saka. So don't buy him in Game Week 8. I'd buy him in Game Week 9. And for who? Maybe Foden simply because of the fixtures. But then again, to be honest, with the way things are going, I think I'd say Mbeumo. I'm not sure who that fourth midfielder is, by the way. You said Leno. I'm guessing that's wrong. Thank you, Sanjay. Good luck, and I'll see you very soon. Idea for content: set up a second team, and every transfer sub captain you let chat decide by voting. That's a really good idea, to be fair, and it's probably going to do better than my team, especially the way things have gone this season. And maybe that could become my main team, but I appreciate that. I'll consider it for the future. Thank you, Domba. Twisted Parky says, I already have Botman, so hopefully no curse. Well, yeah, but the way it works is the most transferred in player. Look, I think it will be broken, of course. It's not going to happen 38 games, this season. If it does, we're looking at something almost impossible, really. But yeah, I think Botman's still got a good chance if he starts, and I think he will. Not enough people talking about the fact that City don't even have enough players to fill their bench. Yeah, I look at their bench, it looks fairly weak, but they've got Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne, Kovacic. Grealish was out, of course, until recently, so they've had some injuries. John Stones. But Man City, what they have is players that can play 3 or 4 positions. John Stones can play centre-back, right-back, defensive midfield. Bernardo Silva can play anywhere on the pitch, really, even as a false 9. And that's the quality City have. They've got some really intelligent players, very versatile, and yeah, their system is just king, really, in the way they go. So yeah, it's true. Their squad depth isn't particularly great in terms of numbers, but it is in terms of quality. Adnan says, does Cher and Botman have the same chances? I think Cher still has more attacking threat, but I've always said Botman is my preference because he's cheaper and he also gets more bonus points and points per 90 since last season. Domba says, have the team be the same as yours from when you do the wild card, then it'll be different. Yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. That's a good aim. That's a good suggestion. Sorry, I read aim in another comment accidentally. Do we need to sell Alvarez now? No, we don't need to sell him because Wolves away is still a good fixture. I think Alvarez is good. The way Arsenal are defending at the Emirates, I could see Alvarez causing havoc. Of course, the fixtures aren't good, really. And you could argue that we really maybe missed the boat. Those that brought him in ahead of Game Week 6, we missed the boat and we bought him too late. And now things aren't looking too good. But look, I have to say, Rodri being sent off kind of it set a domino effect where Alvarez got subbed off and things changed like that. Watkins facing a 10-man Chelsea. Things like this can really influence the FPL points, and ultimately it is down to luck sometimes. But I think Alvarez is fine still. What is your goal this season? Well, it always is to improve upon my last rank, but it's looking very difficult so far. It is only 5-6 game weeks in, but I am a bit concerned about my start and my recent run, I'd say. In the last 4 game weeks, I think I had 2 solid game weeks in game weeks 1 and 2, but since then it's been absolutely awful. FPL Diamond, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, look, Longstaff, once again, could be a cheap, decent option, but he's not someone you'd want to start. That's my point. Best Villa triple up, Dylan? Oh, Diaby, Watkins, and Cash. I think that's the way to go. No, Maddison isn't ruled out. He is a doubt for the Liverpool game. I think he'll be fine, but wait for more updates before selling him. Don't sell him right now. Twan says, hi, Dylan. Is it better Rashford, Bruno to Son? I prefer selling Rashford, but I do concede that Rashford still has a really good chance of scoring against Palace and Brentford. I think he did last season against these opponents, so be very careful with that. But I would sell Rashford to Son in Game Week 8, and I'd keep Bruno. Or Mbeumo to Matoma Gordon. What I do, Twan, is Rashford to Son in Game Week 8, and I do Mbuma to Matoma in Game Week 10. I think that's the best way to go about it. Everyone will triple captain Haaland this double game week. Yeah, potentially, that is true. The only caveat to that is if there's rotation, if there's also Champions League games in between and stuff like that, or you've also got the FA Cup starting in January, so things can obviously change, but yeah, Haaland triple captaincy in a double game week, of course, is going to be massive. Yeah, Violet, I'll be honest, I'm not enjoying it as much, but it's also to do with the fact that I'm not doing very well, and it does seem like a few 50-50 calls have gone the other way, and of course, luck is always involved, but I do feel I've made some bad decisions. But look, it's all kind of, yeah, it all really depends. Of course, if you have a good start to the season, you're going to enjoy it more naturally, and sometimes, no matter where you are in terms of rank, you're still going to enjoy it, ultimately. But I think the main reason why I'm not enjoying FPL so much this season, besides the rank, is the fact that everyone, and including myself, captains Erling Haaland, and sometimes when you take a risk against them, you can be severely punished, even though the decision might not have been that bad on paper. I'll be honest, I don't like the fact that Haaland is kind of a permanent captain. Even when Salah was doing really good the season before that, you know, with those talks about Salah, you know, is he ruining the game? Haaland has taken that to another level for me. Luis Diaz to Joe Bowen or Ward-Prowse for a -4. Difficult. I see Bowen as more explosive, whilst Ward-Prowse is more consistent. So it could be another Son versus Maddison situation. I think I still prefer Bowen, just because he's more advanced. But Ward-Prowse is a good option as well. This season is a bit weird, isn't it? Yeah, I think so too. Game week 1, really good start for the template, but afterwards I think it's just gone absolutely berserk. Not just the 50-50 calls and variants, but also other factors as well. Kind of, you know, Newcastle losing 3 games, then being Aston Villa 5-1 in Game Week 1 and Sheffield United 8-0. So it's been a very unpredictable start. I don't think anyone expected Spurs to be, you know, doing so well. Arsenal have been a bit shaky. So yeah. Is Saka any good at darts? To be honest, I wouldn't have done that. Look, I know they're friends and stuff like that, but yeah, I just... Look, it's just a celebration, and it's being kind of magnified because Arsenal basically lost. It felt like a loss, but I wouldn't have done that celebration, to be honest. Best Luton defender, probably Kabore. You know, Bell is your kind of safe bet, but Kabore is my favourite. Is it possible to see how many in the top 10 50k have played their chips? I think it is, but you'd have to use sites like FPL Review, I think it is. I haven't really used these sites, to be honest, but that could be one. Violet, we've talked about Gordon already, but just be aware, he's 1 yellow card away from suspension. If you want, bring him in, but if he gets suspended, that's a risk you have to be willing to take. Who to bench? Cher, Botman, Estupinian, Akanji, Kabore. Probably Estupinian. One of the few times I'd say him. Weiseng says, if Chelsea really sack Poch, then they really are finished, and I'm out. Well, the thing is with Chelsea, they're not a club synonymous with patience and giving managers time, even with Todd Bowley. Look, I think Poch will do all right if he's given time, but the environment seems quite toxic. There's a bloated squad, and that also plays a part in some unhappy members. There is a lack of quality in certain positions, despite spending $1 billion or whatever it is in the space of a year. What's wrong with Zinchenko this season? To be honest, I don't see a particular difference between this season and last season. Zinchenko is always going to be the same. You know, he's capable of brilliance in terms of passing between the lines, one of the best in the world at that. But he's also very suspect defensively, and he's someone you can target on the left-hand side. And that's why I think the Timber injury was massive in Game Week 1. And I think if Timber was still fit, he's playing there as the left-back on most games, and he's way more defensively solid than Zinchenko. And he also offers some decent in-possession play. So, look, Zinchenko's a good player, but he's always going to be a pretty bad defender. Darius says, I already did Chilwell to Trippier, as I wouldn't have been able to do it after the price changes. Would you roll the second transfer or do Alvarez to Morris? I'd roll the transfer. I wouldn't sell Alvarez to Morris, even if it's for free. Yeah, NH, the rank is on screen on the left-hand side, 2.7 million. And look, whenever this happens and I have a bad start to the season or I'm at a bad rank, people are like, why do you make videos and streams? You're so bad. Look, it's only 5 game weeks, 6 game weeks, and there's a long way to go, and I still think there's not too much to separate these different ranks, but I'm already kind of anticipating those kind of troll comments. And look, I honestly don't care about the rank overall. I'd prefer to do better, but at the end of the day, it's just a virtual number. Wilson, Højlund and Jesus, should I sell them? I'll be honest, I think Højlund's the one I'd rather keep. With Jesus, there'll be more rotation, and I said this before. And I think he's an absolute quality player, Gabriel Jesus, but he's not a good finisher. And the fixtures are terrible for Arsenal. Now, it could backfire because he plays Bournemouth next, which looks like a great fixture. But ultimately, I would sell Jesus, and probably around Game Week 8 when he plays Man City. I don't really see him scoring against them. And Arsenal could still struggle unless those 4 players come back from injury. So I would sell Jesus. I'd give Højlund a bit of time, but I would sell Jesus probably in Game Week 8. Yeah, thank you, Wasteling. I appreciate that. And no worries, NH. Twan says, hi Dylan, please bench 2. I'd bench Stupinian and Chilwell. No, actually, sorry, apologies. I jumped the gun there. I would bench Udogie and Chilwell. Yeah, true, Chilwell could play, but obviously Gusto's a right back and things could change and they could put someone else at right back. But yeah, you might be right. Chilwell could start, but honestly, I've had enough of him at this point. And I still think Fulham could score and cause problems to them. I think Udogie definitely bench because he's playing Liverpool, despite his attacking potential. I don't think Estupinian will do well, but he's still a much better option than Chilwell for me. So I'd bench Chilwell and Udogie. Darius is currently 193k. Salah's been brilliant for me. Eze definitely the letdown on my team. Had him since Game Week 1, but I'm still willing to hold him. I think the thing with Salah is, you know, people look at him and think, oh, the rest of my squad is kind of weak as a result and I can't get this player like Son or Bruno in the midfield. But I think the reason why those that have had Salah this season have been doing so well, besides his consistency, is the fact that the cheaper options like a Ward-Prowse, even Jeroboam, these kind of cheaper 6-7 million midfielders and Boomer, Mitoma have done so well. And that has coincided into a really good start to the season. But let's wait and see if that kind of continues. But I still think you can make a solid squad with Salah. You just have to make a few sacrifices here and there. Yeah, Eze, I have to say I'm very surprised by. I thought we'd do much better, but that's FPL for you. Thoughts on Højlund and Jesus? I covered them just now. I'd sell Jesus maybe after Bournemouth, but ahead of Man City. As for Højlund, I'd give him a bit more time. I'm going to look at Salah captain over Højlund some weeks, definitely, and that's why there will be a big push towards him, and also a lot of wildcards played in Game Weeks 8 or 9. So from that perspective, that's completely understandable. But you can also go against Salah captaincy with the likes of Heung-min Son, of course. But I have to say, Salah for me is the one you want to go for against Everton and Nottingham Forest at home. Ken Back says, hi Dylan, Saliba and Chilwell out for Trippier and Botman from -4. No, don't sell Saliba against Bournemouth for me. I know Bournemouth could cause problems, and I said that myself, but last time out against Bournemouth, he got a clean sheet, 3-0 win, he scored a goal. I wouldn't sell Saliba. Would I sell Chilwell? Yes, and Trippier and Botman are really good transfers, but I wouldn't sell Saliba from -4. What's your goal celebration? To be honest, I'm mainly a goalkeeper, but when I did play outfield and I scored, I mean, to be honest, I don't really celebrate because kind of mainly casual games and stuff like that, but yeah, I don't know. Goal celebration, just whatever I feel in the moment, but it wouldn't be a dart throwing or, you know, this kind of copying thing. I'm seriously thinking of going Game Weeks 8 to 12 out Haaland. Yeah, that's fair. And it's also a bit more interesting because it finally opens up to the likes of Salah, Son, Bruno, etc. And you're completely right about that. And the fixtures aren't great for Man City. Haaland will still probably score a lot of goals, you know, maybe get a brace or a hat-trick in that time frame, but generally speaking, his ceiling will be lower and you might not captain him. So from that perspective, it makes sense. I'd still keep Haaland though. I just think he's essential at this point. And of course, my feelings could change in a few weeks' time, but the reason why I'm kind of being boring in my answer is because Man City creates so many chances. Yeah, Vincent, it's simply because of that. And Sterling he's never been the most clinical player. At Man City, he had a really good record because he got so many chances created for him. He doesn't have that same luxury at Chelsea, so he needs a lot of chances to score, and the quality around him isn't great. So in terms of assists, he might be creating some chances, but the likes of Jackson keep fluffing the lines. So it's kind of a mixture, you know, Chelsea being that bad and not scoring enough goals. Jackson replacement for Game Week 8 onwards, probably Watkins then, which sounds crazy considering I just sold him. But yeah, I'd say Watkins with the fixtures in mind. Hi Dylan, Pickford or Areola this week. Areola still. I trust West Ham more than Everton. Dogish says, got Morris for Jackson today to avoid price changes or target Newcastle defence. I'd rather target Newcastle defence, to be fair. I think Morris is a good player to have in Game Week 7. And honestly, you don't need to target or avoid price changes when you're downgrading from Jackson to Morris. I know you don't want to lose value if you end up making the move anyway, but there are midweek games going on. So generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend making an early transfer. I'd rather go for a Newcastle defender, to be honest. And to be honest, your defense is fine, but Chilwell to Trippier or Botman is a really good transfer for you. Raya or Ramsdale? Well, Raya is my preference. Look, they're two good goalkeepers. Ramsdale hasn't done anything particularly wrong, but he has been shaky for quite a few months now, in my opinion. And there are some occasions, like Fulham at home, where I know it's Saka's fault. It generally is, he's the main culprit. But Ramsdale, if he stays firm, easy save in the near post. He has had a few moments like that throughout the season, and also dating back to the last campaign. But look, I said it from a month ago, especially when we signed Raya. I'd start him over Ramsdale for now, and start Ramsdale in the Carabao Cup and FA Cup. It might seem disrespectful, might seem harsh, but that's what I would do. Look, there are two good goalkeepers, but at this moment in time, I'd go for Raya. Just the Parky says I can keep Leno with Turner for all 4 million goalkeeper, Lamptey and Douglas Luiz instead of Gordon, and sacrifice Archer for Woodrow. Yeah, I think that's fine, to be fair. There are a few things, of course, here and there, like Douglas Luiz, Lamptey, that I'm not a big fan of, but look, overall, it's a good wildcard squad. You should do well, and it's not the worst thing in the world to have, those sort of bench options. Raya could become is that a neat option, is it, on the wildcard? Yeah, you could. The reason why I wouldn't recommend him yet on the wildcard is because Arsenal's fixtures are poor. After Bournemouth, they play Man City. Chelsea and Sheffield United after aren't too bad, but yeah, it's just when Man City's on the horizon, you better have a good backup goalkeeper, and you probably do with Areola or Turner, etc. But I'd just be a bit careful with that. William will score a hat-trick against Chelsea. There's no way he's going to score a hat-trick. Has he even scored a hat-trick in his career? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I know he's got a hat-trick of assists before, but hat-trick is a completely different story. He could score, but I think a hat-trick is a bit too much. Oh yeah, NH, I know it wasn't a troll comment. I was just saying in general. I was kind of building upon your comment. I know you weren't doing that. Don't worry. I'm not that much of a snowflake to get offended over your comment. Don't worry. Abram says, Sterling out, bank 11.2. I have Saka, Boomer, Bruno, Madison. Who should I get, Diaby or Foden? I prefer Diaby. You have to take the fixtures into account and the price, and Diaby for me is the superior option with that considered. And look, you can get Salah as well, so I think that's the perfect thing to do for you. Is it a good thing? I have two accounts. My main is doing rubbish, 2 million, but my second is decent. Well, that might as well become your main team then, if it continues like that, to be honest. If we pick Leno, then Chelsea bound to score. I don't think Chelsea's bound to score, to be honest. My prediction for the game is probably 1-1. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was 0-0. It really wouldn't surprise me. And if it does end 0-0, you can bet that Leno's probably going to get some bonus points as well. Best time to wildcard, I obviously appreciate it's a popular question. I have made a wildcard video if you want to check it out. It's on the channel. It's all team dependent. I think for a lot of people, you can start considering now. You can use it now. But I think Game Weeks 8 to 9 is even better. And there's also some fixture swings in Game Week 9 and Game Week 10 to consider when you're making your wildcard squad. But I'd probably say Game Weeks 8 to 9 look best for most people. Stay away from Brighton and Arsenal goalkeepers. Yeah, I'd actually be more concerned with Brighton because they seem to chop and change way too often. I think Raya is genuinely the number one pick right now, but Raya is still going to be a risk. What to do with Gusto? Well, sell, of course, because he's suspended, and either way, Chelsea have some poor fixtures coming up when the suspension ends. So, yeah, I'd sell Gusto. You might not need to sell him yet, but ultimately he's a sell. Choose the 5 best midfielders on the wild card. If money's no issue, if that's the case, then I'd say Salah, Son, Madison, Diaby, and Saka, but I'm guessing that's unrealistic, so I'd then probably go towards either Bowen or Mbeumo. It's a difficult one, really. And for example, if you go for Mbeumo now on the wild card, that's great. But then around Game Week 10, you probably move him on to Matoma anyway. And do you want to booking transfers? That's something else you need to weigh up with the rest of your wild card squad if you're looking to take some one-week punts like Morris up front. So it is all team dependent. But of course, the best 5 midfielders, they're going to be the most expensive ones generally. Salah, Son, Saka, probably Bruno, and I'd say Madison. Is Stupinian, Cash, Romero, Sinchenko, Botman pick free to play this week? It would be Sinchenko, Estupinian, and Botman, yeah. It'd be those three. That's still a good rank to be in FPL Diamond, but I do appreciate that is obviously a heavy rank drop, and it's not ideal, but still a good position to be in. You could easily make that up in the next week. Broya, 4.9 million option as a third striker. Honestly, as a third striker, I just stick to Archer or a 4.5 million forward. I think that's really what I do. Yeah, Andy, you are right. That is true, but 30 points does seem like a lot, to be honest. Captain Saka, Haaland or Morris? I'd say I'm currently going for Haaland. Boring. I know it's boring, but I think Man City will win 3-0. And I think Haaland, with the amount of chances he's getting, he's bound to score pretty much. Of course, Morris is a decent option with the double game week, 2 good fixtures, and Saka has a good fixture too. But I think Arsenal-Bournemouth could be a bit more tighter than we expect, which, yeah, would be a shame for those with Arsenal players, but probably Haaland. Play Saliba, Trippier, and Kabore, and bench Stupinian. Yeah, I do the exact same. How essential is Trippier? Trippier is not essential. Let me make that clear. He is probably the best Newcastle defender in isolation, but he's also very expensive, and it could prevent you from going for Son or Salah. Yeah, Botman is enough cover for me. And you could even go one further and add Pope or Burn to double up on Newcastle defensively, and you maybe go one better than Trippier. I mean, yeah, Ramsdale is good enough to start for most teams, I agree, but it doesn't mean Raya is number one forever. I have to make that clear. Just at this moment in time, I think Raya should be number one. And look, Ramsdale's a young goalkeeper. He's got a lot of time to improve, but he needs to improve on certain things. I think his distribution is still good, but Raya's is probably even better. And I also think in terms of claiming crosses, Ramsdale can be a bit shaky, and there are occasions where he loses concentration, especially towards the beginning of matches. Dylan, do you also start the season slow like most of us? I don't know. Generally speaking, I start okay. Much better than this. I'd be in like the 100,000 marks. And then I think as the season goes on, I improve. Once I kind of get a good feeling about the best players and teams to pile up on, I make some good decisions there and I make some good transfers, play a decent wildcard. So yes, I would expect to build upon where I am now for sure. But I don't generally start this badly, I think. And it's kind of weird because in Game Week 1, I had a very good start. Yeah, I'd sell Gusto now. Look, when I say now, I mean this week. It doesn't have to be now, you know, as we're speaking. Dylan, who would you want the second goalkeeper after Leno? Areola. You know, if you're going for Leno, go for that rotation with West Ham and Fulham. Chelsea slowly make Enzo look like an average player. I still think Enzo's been doing well. But it's difficult, of course, to keep on playing 7 or 8 out of 10 when you're surrounded by some poor players or when things aren't clicking. Would you start Flecken versus Forest or Pickford versus Luton? That's a great question. This is one of the few times I'll say this, but probably Pickford, simply because he's facing Luton and Flecken and Forest. I think Brentford will concede. My first time playing FPL and I'm getting spanked in my mini league. Yeah, no, it's not too late to catch up, mate. It's literally, it's 6 game weeks. I'll give you a story. I always kind of refer to this, but around game week 19 or 20, I had an awful start. This was maybe 3-4 years ago. Before I even played FPL, you know, seriously, I didn't even make transfers every week and stuff like that. Literally, I was 100 points, 90 to 100 points behind number one in the mini league. I was around, what, 3rd, 4th, you know. It was just an absolutely awful position to be in, and I ended up winning the league by a comfortable margin. Now, you know, they also weren't maybe the most switched on managers either. But even me, you know, not making transfers every week, not being that informed about FPL those years ago, I think it was 4 years ago now at this point, I was still able to claw back a 100-point deficit around that, around game week 19. So it's definitely not too late. It is a lot of points, but trust me, there's still a long time to go. Yep, Saka's good, of course. I mean, just look at his consistency. Even when he plays badly, and I think he started the season quite poorly in terms of his performances, he still gets goals and assists. So, yeah, he is a good option. Thoughts on Mudryk? He's got potential, but so far it's not working. And I think he'd just do better in another environment. I just don't think Chelsea suits him. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe in a year or two, we're talking about a completely different play and scenario, and Chelsea are looking good, but I think he'd do much better out of Brighton or even just an Aston Villa. I just don't think Chelsea's the right club for him and his development. Off topic, have you ever... no, I've not pre-ordered. I don't think I'm going to get it. I talked about this in the last stream. I've gotten every FIFA since FIFA 04, with the exception of FIFA 10 and 11, I think. And I don't think I'm getting it this year. The only exception, and I always say this, is if there's a massive discount, and because I'm game sharing, I'm basically spending nothing on the game, but I don't think I will. I'm just kind of sick of FIFA at this point. I think it's a terrible game, in my opinion. Thank you, Dogish. I should have listened to you. You told me not to go with Mbuma for Matoma. Just got scared with the most picked player. Look, Dogish, I sometimes say things that are wrong, or that things that don't turn out the right way. I appreciate the kind words, but look, these things happen. And when Matoma was benched, I think I understand why he did it, because Matoma played in the Europa League. There was the chance of rotation. He was benched in the end. And for him to come off the bench and score 2 is harsh. But facing Bournemouth, you could just argue it's the right or wrong call, whatever it may be. But yeah, look, FPL is so difficult to predict, and we're all going to get things wrong. Best 4.2 on the defender to replace Gusto. Probably Kabore or Bell for the double game week, but that's really about it. What to do with Gusto? I'd sell him, as I told you before. If you have Morris, I think you need to take a gamble. Yeah, fair enough. I definitely consider it, no doubt about it. But the reason why I'm a bit apprehensive in a way is because he's a Luton Town player, and I don't trust him enough to create chances for him to make the most of those 2 good fixtures. I'd play Areola this week, no doubt about it. I think Sanchez could concede despite his solid start to the season. Gusto to Burn, yep, good transfer. I prefer Botman, but Burn's still fine. Do you think Chilwell's starting next week? I think he is, but at the moment I'm benching him. I just can't be asked for another 0-pointer. Coming off the bench and getting a yellow card, I'm sick of it. Saliba to Botman as a luxury move in Game Week 5. I'm guessing that's Game Week... Oh no, that was a few weeks ago. Even when Saliba was playing Everton was a stroke of luck. I'm currently up 14 points. Yeah, and Saliba did... very well in Game Week 5, but that's the way it goes. So fair play. And now Saliba faces Man City very soon, so it's looking good. Same as my worst start, despite last season being poor as well. Yeah, like I said, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I'm generally around between 100 and 500k, maybe 700k at this stage. So decent position, and then I build upon it. And one kind of recurring theme for me is, between Game Weeks 20 and 30, I'm generally kind of stuck in the top 100k. So I go from 70k to 100k, then up to 50, and I can't really build upon that into the top 10k. So I'm looking to change that this season. But it's looking difficult right now. Thank you, FPL Diamond. Twan says, hi Dylan, what is the plan if Maddison's injured? Well, if Maddison's injured, I'd actually be open to wildcarding now, and then bring in Heung-min Son and play it that way. But it all depends on the extent of Maddison's injury, of course. That also plays a part. I have Rashford, Bruno, and Mbeumo. Saka, can't bring Foden because I have free City. Yeah, it's a good midfield you have, but Rashford is someone you could sell, even Mbeumo in Game Week 10. But things change very quickly, of course. Will Henderson start over Johnston soon? I can't guarantee you either way. I think Johnston keeps his spot, but eventually I think he will. It's just a matter of time. Matchday predictions. I mean, I can give you some very quickly. Yeah, Wiss is all right against Forest, but there has been a clear drop-off. I think in his last 4 games, his XG is around 0.3, which is absolutely awful. In the first 2 game weeks, it was around 2, basically. So there has been a clear drop-off there for Wissa. I'm not as keen on him as I was before. So if I now check quickly the... so just in terms of scores, I'd say Aston Villa, Brighton... Villa have a good record against them. They're a bit of a bogey team for the Seagulls, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to go for 2-1 Aston Villa. Bournemouth, Arsenal. I'm probably going to go for 2-0 Arsenal, I guess. Hopefully I'm right. I'd like a clean sheet and a more comprehensive win. Everton against Luton Town. I'm going to go for 1-0 Everton. Man United against Palace. I'm going for 2-0 Man United. It could be even more narrow, 2-1, but I'm going to stick with 2-0, I think. Newcastle, Burnley, I'm going to go for 3-0 Newcastle. But yeah, some predictions I'm kind of in 2 minds about. You know what? I think I'm going to go for 2-1 Man United and 2-0 Newcastle. West Ham against Sheffield United, I'm going to go for 2-0 again, I think. Yeah, a bit boring. Wolves against Man City, 3-0 Man City. Spurs, Liverpool, 2-2. Nottingham Forest, Brentford, 1-1. Fulham, Chelsea, I'm going to go for a 0-0. I think Leonard's going to do well again. Luton Town against Burnley, I'm going to go for... That's a really difficult game to predict, by the way. You know what? I'm going to give Burnley a 2-1 win. But I could definitely change that. That's the one I'm least confident about. I don't know as much about Luton Town and Burnley as I do with the other teams. So yeah, I'm going to go for 2-1 Burnley. Those are my predictions for this week. I could change it, of course, by the deadline stream, so I might go back to that. Enzo's only registered one win against the current Premier League side since Chelsea signed him for 106 million. Yeah, but look, that's not a fault of Enzo. What he's at fault at is joining Chelsea. I said this around January, and I wasn't even trying to be salty. For me, it was a bad decision with the way Chelsea were. I thought they'd improve massively this season. So far, it hasn't been the case. So yeah, he really could have stayed at Benfica and then joined Man City, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, or Real Madrid. He could have gone absolutely anybody. I think so, to be honest. I think I would sell Wissa, which might seem reactionary, but literally the underlying numbers are absolutely down in the last 3-4 game weeks. So, wow, London W4 says, no FIFA, you're a real one. Thank you. That doesn't mean I'm going for pairs or whatever it's called nowadays, eFootball, but I'm just more of a single player guy at the moment. I think online games just cause too much rage for me. I'm very competitive, but I think FIFA is genuinely full of BS scripting. I really hate that game, honestly. I hate the momentum swings there. How many times do you go live a week? Thank you, as I appreciate that. It depends, really, but generally speaking, I go live 2 times a week, so reaction stream. Typically on the Sunday, sometimes on the Monday. I was in no shape yesterday to stream because of Saturday night. No need to go into details. And then, of course, the deadline stream on Friday, Saturday, or whenever the deadline is. And when UCL Fantasy is concerned, I also do a deadline for that. So, yeah, in a Champions League week, it will be 3 streams a week. If there's no Champions League, it will be 2. Mitton was benched and he took it personally. Exactly. That's what I mean. Those sort of things, I kind of sympathise with those that benched or sold him. Chelsea have 39 points from the last 38 Premier League games. That is absolutely insane. I never expected that to be the case. Apart from Luton, who else is playing double gaming this weekend? Burnley. So literally, we'll go through the fixtures here again. Let me just get the message off screen. So yeah, you've got Burnley facing Newcastle away. Just here, I think. Yeah, can't highlight it, but yeah. So Newcastle, Burnley, and Luton Town, Burnley. So yeah, Burnley are facing Newcastle and Luton Town away, and meanwhile, Luton Town are facing Everton away and Burnley at home. So Luton have the better fixtures on paper, and I think Morris is the best double game week player. But yeah, those are the only double game weeks we have, and of course, I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but 2 teams have to have a double, basically. You know what I mean. Yeah. FPL Diamond, very depressing. That is true. Thank you, FPL Diamond. I appreciate that. Will Alvarez start? Yeah, I think he will. I think he will be benched against Newcastle. There are rumours of heavy rotation from Man City. And I think Alvarez will start against Wolves. Bowley's a waste man, says FPL Diamond. Fair enough. Would it make it more interesting if you could not captain the same person the following week? I mean, it could make FPL a bit more interesting, maybe, but I don't know. It just seems like Haaland... Look, you can go against him, of course you can, but I don't see many viable alternatives most game weeks, at least in my squad. You know, maybe I just don't pick my team well enough for that, but I just see every single game week, and Haaland just typically is the best captain. And yeah, really, I'll be honest, when I'm looking at game week 8, that's where I'll probably go against Haaland. And the only reason I'd captain Haaland there is to jinx him against Arsenal. That's literally the only reason I'd captain him. But maybe I'd go for a Maddison or Son against Luton Town away. But for the time being, in game week 7, I think I'm just going to stick with him. I'm 0.1 million out for Areola if I get Leno. That is frustrating, but it could be someone else in another position you could downgrade for that, but it isn't ideal. Sancho versus Anthony, who's better? I mean, during that time at Man United, you could argue Anthony, but I think Sancho, you know, I saw him at Dortmund. He was really exciting to watch, one of the most coveted talents in Europe, so my answer is Sancho. Chelsea sacked Bruno, says Twister Parky. Oh, the interim. I think he was just an interim for one manager, for one game. What? So he was actually, I wasn't aware. So he was a squad, or what is it called? A coaching staff member now, and he got sacked. I'm not aware of that, actually. Best goes to replacement if I only have 4.2 million to spend. Like I said, you're probably looking at Kabore or Bell. Probably Kabore, but it's just a 1 week punt, really. Could it be overlooking Chilwell starting and providing attacking returns against Fulham? Potentially. You could be right. I'm not going to deny that, to be fair. Thank you, FPL Diamond, for moderating the chat. I appreciate it. Thoughts on JWP? Would you play Diaby over JWP? Not this week. I prefer Diaby overall, but I wouldn't play him over James Ward-Prowse this week. I think so, John. I predicted 2-0, I think it was, or 3-0 against Burnley, but with the way the most transferred in curse is moving, I don't think it's a guarantee, let's put it that way. We have a rule in our UCL Fantasy Mini League to not captain Haaland. To be honest with UCL Fantasy, though, that's a much more exciting game anyway for me, especially in the last 2 years, I'd say. Because, especially in the group stages, you have, I mean, I've probably got this wrong. Is it 32 teams? You got 32 teams, so many different options. You know, in the forward line alone, you've got so many choices, even with Messi and Ronaldo leaving Europe. It's just exciting. And you've got different captaincy options every single day. And actually, I was going to captain Lewandowski in the first day. I ended up switching to Haaland. And in the end, switching to Bellingham, you know, was really good. But even in UCL Fantasy, I've had a bad start. I know I got around, I think, 70 points, but I generally have a much better start. Last season I got 116, so I'm looking to bounce back in UCL Fantasy because I typically do very well there. So yeah, look, I think UCL Fantasy in general, you don't need to have those sort of rules because it's just more exciting than FPL anyway. You think Sterling will play in strike for next Premier League game now that Jackson is suspended? It's a possibility. I wouldn't rule that out, but whether he's playing up front on the left wing, or right wing, I don't trust Sterling at all. And I think that was the most reactionary transfer I made. I still explain my logic behind it. You know, he did very well against Luton Town, but besides that, he was facing Forest and I think it was Bournemouth, two of his favourite opponents. You know, he scored against Forest on both occasions last season. Bournemouth is his favourite opponent, you know, historically. Maybe he's a bit lucky not to have returned so far as well, but yeah, it's just been an absolute flop. And honestly, whether he plays up front or on the wings, I just don't trust him. Pope versus Raya. I prefer Pope FPL-wise. As an overall goalkeeper, I prefer Raya, to be fair. Bruno Salta was a coach they poached from Brighton. Yeah, if he's the same one that I'm thinking of, I'm pretty sure he was interim against Liverpool last season in a 0-0 draw. But yeah, I wasn't aware that he got sacked recently, if that's the case, if that's what you're on about. Morris captain for Double Gameweek. I wouldn't rule it out. The reason why I wouldn't go for it myself is, one, because I'm boring, and two, because I don't trust Luton Town enough, you know, to really... I know Morris is decent anyway, but Luton Town is kind of like... They could get battered in these games. I know it's Burnley and Everton, but yeah, I don't trust them enough really to go ahead with a captaincy like that. I don't pick Haaland ever for my second team. He's not even in it. Yeah, in a second team, of course, and you want to go for a bit of fun, I wouldn't go for him either. But that's the only time, really. I know Cho will be benched because they give the armband to Connor in Chelsea IG. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Cho was just really frustrating. Good start. I thought he was looking like one of the best defenders after Game Week 1. I had him from the beginning of the season, but it's just been an absolute flop in the last 3 game weeks. Thoughts on Salah? Look, I wouldn't say he's a must-buy. And I also don't think of him as a luxury because I see what you mean. Having him probably weakens other areas in your team, but he is still a top quality option. He is so consistent. He justifies that price tag, especially from Game Week 9 onwards when he has some great fixtures where you'd captain him over Haaland, but I don't think he's a must-buy. Check out my wildcard video. I've got 2 drafts, one with Salah, one without, and it's very difficult, I think, to separate them. I'm on 381 at the moment. Good stuff, mate. It's a good position to be in. Remzino says, should I start Trippier, Stupinian, Ruben Dias or Kabore? I mean, Trippier has to start, to be honest. I'd also go for Ruben Dias as well. If I had to pick one from those 4, it's Trippier, but Ruben Dias as well. I'd find a way into the team. I think City keep a clean sheet. Yeah, I think Donnarumma was better at AC Milan. PSG's been very suspect. I mean, you saw his mistake against Real Madrid. Everyone makes mistakes, of course, but that's just a massive one to make at that stage of the game. Yeah, he was interim versus Liverpool, yeah, but I'm not... What I was basically asking is, did he get sacked recently as well? Was he part of the coaching staff and then he got sacked in the last few days or hours? I'm actually not aware. Who to play, Mbeumo or Morris? Well, this week I'd play Morris, but Mbeumo's still a decent option this week. Hypothetically, do you play Bell over Saliba or Estupinian? I'd play him over Estupinian, to be honest. I think Estupinian will likely blank. Villa have a good record against Brighton, and Saliba still has a good chance of a clean sheet against Bournemouth, even though Arsenal are looking a bit shaky, but mainly at home. Sterling to Saka for a -4, already transferred out Gusto to Botman. I think it is worth it, but just bear in mind, Saka plays Man City in Game Week 8, and that isn't ideal. But long-term, Saka's a great transfer. Thoughts on Bruno G this week? I wouldn't go for Bruno Guimaraes. I'll be completely honest with you. I know he did really well against Sheffield United, but I just don't see that being a common occurrence. I'd rather just go for the Newcastle defenders or Callum Wilson up top, even Gordon in the midfield, who is a rotation risk. Oh, thank you, Tuster Park. I actually wasn't aware of that. WB says, for a -4, which option? I like both duos a lot, but I'd go for Botman and Son because Son plays Luton Town away in game week 8, and I'd rather have Son over Bowen over the next 4 or 5. And I also think Botman offers better value than Trippier, but really close, really close. Thank you, Safir. Thank you very much, and good night to you as well. Can you name 5th midfielder which can be a differential? Yeah, I like Gordon, but once again, 4 yellow cards, 1 more and he gets suspended. That is a big concern, but he is a good option. If you're looking for a cheap midfielder, then I think he's one of the best ones, but the suspension risk is a concern. I'd go for Areola, Matteo. Onana's calm. He's a decent option, but I'd go for Areola. Mbeumo or Gordon or Diaz. Mbeumo still for me. I think if Gordon didn't have that suspension risk running over him, I think I'd go for Mbeumo. London says they should get you on FPL juice, best FPL content available. Yeah, I've seen some of their videos, really good stuff. I think they're quite different to most people. I don't really watch FPL channels, to be honest, but they're one of the few I do, so that is a good shout. How come you got rid of the beard, bro? If I'm being completely honest, because I was shaving a little bit and, you know, it wasn't going great and I just got rid of everything. That's the simple truth. But I don't mind shaving every once in a while. Yeah, I'm kind of mixed bag. I don't really like shaving, and in general, yeah, I'd say I prefer how I look with a beard, but it just gets out of control too quickly, and I really can't be asked to keep on keeping it in check. 94 points here, Matoma help from the bench. Yeah, that's what I mean. So fair play. I think with Matoma, that was generally just a really weird situation. Of course, him being benched wasn't a big surprise, but for him to do so well off the bench is another matter. Should I start Kabore or Estupinian? It might seem foolish, but I'd probably go for Kabore. I think Estupinian is a much better FPL option, but I think he'll blank against Aston Villa. And you've got Kabore having a double game week. And last week, people were asking me Kabore or Saliba, Doggy, and I said Kabore, and he did well. I'm going to go for him again, I guess, but it's not really the most ideal pick, even with a double game week. Thank you to those for tuning in. We've been streaming for 2 hours now. It's gone by so quickly. We've covered every single question and comment pretty much, so I appreciate it. Smash the like button on your way out. Let's get this to over 100 likes if we haven't already. I'll have a quick check as well. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. I'd very much appreciate if you did that, and also check all the links in the description below for the FPL League, the Patreon, channel memberships if you want early access to my videos, and also be featured on my channel on the front page and get exclusive early access. Well, I just said that. Exclusive access as well to the badges and emojis for becoming a member. Be sure to check all of that out, and I'm pretty sure the lowest tier is as little as £3 per month. So yeah, we have got to 124 likes. Let's get this to 150. That'd be massively appreciated. And also massive shout out to those that send in a super chat. That is also massively appreciated. Azza says good night, bro. Good night to you as well. Robin or Sane? I like Sane a lot, by the way. You know this from UCL Fantasy, but I think Robin is still better. And Sane, as good as he is, hasn't really fulfilled his full potential. Good luck to you as well, Twister Parky. I'll see you very soon. I would start Estupinian, Yaya, but I mean, I did say Aston Villa win, but I just think Estupinian is a better option in general, more attacking threat. And I also think both teams concede, so you pretty much just go down to who is more likely to get an attack in return or bonus points. But it's a really close call, to be honest. Well, he's saying maybe, I'll consider it, but in general, the reception for rating the team videos aren't necessarily, I'd say, great or good enough to make that a regular feature. Maybe every 5 or 10 game weeks, I will consider that. But for the time being, we'll wait and see. So basically, the last time I did it was game week 1. I'll maybe look towards, yeah, in the coming weeks, I might do one of them to change things up, especially when there's no Champions League. Do you think Chelsea and United will rise? Well, they'll improve from their current positions, that's for sure. I think United are in a better position. But yeah, long term, there's a lot of work to do for both clubs, of course. Do we really believe a Luton defender can outscore a single game player? Well, Godhead, the reason why I'm saying Kabore over Estupinian at the moment is because I think Estupinian will blank against Villa. Otherwise, it's a different story, of course. And generally speaking, I'd start Estupinian over him all day long. Thank you, Viola. I appreciate that. Peace to you as well, and everyone else watching. I will see you very soon for more FPL and UCL fantasy content. So take care and enjoy the football.